Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hello and welcome to the AI for Good webinar series. My name is Bilal Jamoussi, and I am the Chief of the Study Groups Department at the Standardization Bureau of the International Telecommunication Union. ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, and we are also the host of the all-year, always online AI for Good platform, in partnership with 38 UN sister agencies and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of artificial intelligence to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. Today, I'm honored to welcome you all to the launch event of the initiative on AI for Road Safety, which aims to explore the potential of emerging technologies fueled by AI to enhance worldwide safety on the road, especially in low and medium income countries, where most of the road fatalities and injuries occur. We are privileged to have several dignitaries in our midst today for the launch of this crucial initiative. But as always, we're counting on you, the participants, to help create an engaging session. And for this, we would like to invite you to make use of the question and answer and the chat functions, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. To kickstart this momentous webinar, it is now my pleasure to invite ITU Secretary General, Mr. Hulin Zhao, to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Zhao?
Yeah, I have to show my picture on the screen. Thank you very much, Bilal. Distinguished colleagues and friends. It's a great pleasure to address you today. Especially this is my first day after my long stay of my home life in China of 4 weeks with some kind of very special experiences there. So I hope that you and your families are all in good health and good spirits. Today, we welcome the launch of our new AI for Good Safety Initiative, a partnership of ITU and the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety and Envoy for Technology. We are a partnership committed to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals to halve the number of annual road deaths by 2030 and provide access to safe, affordable, and sustainable transport for all. We have established this AI for Good Safety initiative as the flagship of this commitment and our supporting collaboration. We are building on a wealth of prior work together, and I'm very pleased to be joined today by my good friend, Jing Dot, the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, and also ITU's laureate for road safety, and Olga Agajerova, the Executive Secretary of UNECE, our good partners, to share their perspectives on the future of road safety and the value of our always expanding collaboration. Assistant Secretary General Maria Francesca Spatolazano unfortunately could not join us today, but we are pleased to share her video message. I'm also very pleased to welcome His Excellency Moïse Chachok, Tunisia's Minister for Transport and Logistics. And for some of you who know him, he is not only the Minister of Transport and Logistics of Tunisia, but he was the Minister of ICT of Tunisia, and he was also the Deputy Director General of UNESCO. So he has a very good experiences to share Tunisia's perspective on how new technologies could help us to overcome age-old challenges in road safety. Our work must speak meaningfully to the priorities of national regulators, and I look forward to working with you to ensure that we achieve this. The disproportionate toll of road deaths on developing countries is yet another example of why the benefits of new technologies must reach everyone, everywhere. This is the highest priority of the AI for Good movement and the main guiding light to our new AI for road safety initiative. Working in partnership, we can achieve breakthroughs in road safety, able to save hundreds of thousands of lives every year. Our AI for road safety initiative aims to ensure AI fulfills this great potential to improve safety for all road users, whether traveling by automobile, motorcycle, bicycle, foot, or other emerging modes of transport. We're talking about integrated transport system. Our discussions today will share expert insight into the advances in technology and that have given rise to this potential. As a UN Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, ICTs, ITU's contribution to the AI for Road Safety Initiative, we are built on our standardization work for intelligent transport systems in fields including radio communications, automotive, cybersecurity, vehicular multimedia, and automated driving. We are also certain to draw great value from ITU's long-standing partnership with the UNECE Transport Division, a partnership that ensures synergy between the evolution of vehicle regulations and the development of ICT standards. This inclusive ITU standardization process helps us to move forward together. I look forward to our continued work together to build standards capable of ensuring that advances in road safety are shared worldwide. I wish you a very nice session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zhao, for setting the stage for the discussions we will be having today. And let me also take this opportunity to thank you for your support to this initiative and the strong partnership behind it. Keeping the momentum of the session, I'm now pleased to give the floor to Jean Todt, the United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy for Road Safety, and our committed partner for the new initiative on AI for road safety. Mr. Todt?
Thank you very much. Very happy to be with you today, and Your Excellency, Minister Moez Chachuk, my dear Ulin Zhao, my dear Olga Algayerova, dear friends. This year, we embarked on the second decade of action for road safety. We have recommitted ourselves to achieving ambitious but impelling targets to halve road deaths and injuries and to provide safe, affordable, and sustainable transport for all by 2030. This new decade of action is very different than the last, attributed to the wealth of tools we have at our disposal now, which makes this challenge feel much more achievable than in the past. That is why today I'm so pleased to join the ITU, the UN Envoy on Technology, UNECE, and many other stakeholders to launch the AI for Road Safety initiative. Digital technologies and artificial intelligence are embedded in nearly every aspect of our daily lives. It allows us to access basic services, healthcare, and mobility. Beyond making our life easier, it gives the opportunity to make all transport modes safer, cleaner, smarter, and more efficient. In fact, studies have found that AI could act as an enabler on 79% of the 169 SDG targets, helping to navigate above certain present limitations. We can agree that there is an untapped opportunity to harness AI to close the digital and road safety divide around the world. I'm not only referring to autonomous vehicles. I'm focused on the technologies that will reach the most vulnerable population urgently. The low and middle income countries which continue to bear the biggest burden on our roads. It is the locations where we must see a rapid improvement for us to reach our targets. Basic technologies that are available in vehicles in Europe, for example, such as 112 eCall, has shown to speed up emergency response time by 40% in urban areas and 50% in the countryside. Imagine the opportunity to save life in regions like Africa, where 95% of the population do not yet have access to a centralized emergency number. Similarly, electronic stability control, ESC, has shown to be 50 to 17% effective in preventing fatal single passenger car crashes for sport utility vehicles. The cost of electronic stability control, if adopted in Latin America, for example, will be only about $50 per vehicle. It is unforgivable that it is not a standard feature built into every car sold around the world. Let's also take the basic technology at our fingertips. Mobile device and the range of road safety benefits we could enjoy if properly harnessed, better road safety data, predictability of crashes, prevention of congestions, speedy post-crash response, more use of green mobility, amongst others. Data show that in 2019, 5.2 billion people subscribed to mobile service, accounting for 67% of the global population. We can dream of the possibilities. Full exploitation of artificial intelligence can help transform road safety for the better. This is recognized in the recent UN General Assembly resolution on road safety and in the upcoming Global Plan of Action for the second decade of action for road safety, which will be released later this month. Coordinated efforts at national and international level to upgrade capacity, increase knowledge, and strengthen governance by industry, researchers, and police authorities can bring highly efficient solutions for safer road users, safer vehicles, safer roads. I look forward to working with private public and UN partnership to bring life-saving tools to those who need it most, and to growing this initiative to help realize AI as a catalyst for achieving our 2030 road safety targets and eventually towards a vision zero. And today's opportunity is really to keep, and I really look forward for the conclusion and the actions where will be all undertaken together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd, for the kind remarks and for your collaboration with ITU on the topic of road safety. The visionary approach taken by our respective organizations will lead the way for leveraging AI for road safety. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to Ms. Olga Alguerova, Executive Secretary of UNECE, another long-standing partner of ITU in supporting innovation towards intelligent transportation systems. Ms. Alguerova, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Secretary General of ITU, dear Hulin Zhao, dear Officer in Charge, Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology, Mrs. Maria Francesca Spatolisano, Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Road Safety, dear colleague and friend Jean Todt, and distinguished Minister of Transport and Logistics of Tunisia, His Excellency Moez Chakchou. Colleagues and friends, I'm delighted to be here this afternoon to launch this new initiative AI for road safety by ITU, the SG Special Envoy for Road Safety, and the UN Envoy on Technology. It's indeed very encouraging to see this initiative taking shape and generating interest among many UN departments, agencies, and stakeholders who join us today for an issue that is part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as a priority for UNECE. As you know, UNECE provides comprehensive assistance to its member states in their efforts to improve road safety, including UN conventions, policy tools, training workshops, advisory services, research, and national road safety performance reviews. UNECE services 59 UN conventions for safe, efficient, and environmentally friendly mobility and interregional regional connectivity. This covers, or they cover all modes of inland transport, including road, rail, inland waterway, and intermodal transport. To date, 151 United Nations member states are contracting parties to at least one of those conventions. The General Assembly biennial resolutions on road safety continuously stress the role and importance of the United Nations conventions on road safety. The UNGA resolution 74/299 from 2020 highlights the mandate of UNECE to service the UN conventions on road safety, providing the Secretariat of the Secretary General Special Envoy for Road Safety and the UN Road Safety Fund. This same resolution notes that the continuous progress of automotive and digital technologies could improve road safety. UNECE's World Forum for Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations, our Working Party 29, continuously works to improve vehicle safety through globally harmonized regulations on design, construction, and periodic inspection of vehicles, as well as child seats and helmets. Working Party 29 is also a global intergovernmental platform to support the spread of life-saving technologies such as airbags, ABS, ESC, and automatic braking systems. The 3 agreements on vehicles regulations administered through VP 29 have been recommended by the GA resolutions. Back in 2018, we established a working party on automated, autonomous, and connected vehicles to define the safety requirements and the metrics to assess the safety of automated vehicles, hand in hand with the Global Forum for Road Traffic Safety, what is our Working Party 1, and its groups of experts drafting a new legal instrument on the use of such vehicles in traffic. VP29 collaborates under the framework on automated vehicles initiated by China, the EU, Japan, and the USA. In June last year, Working Party 29 adopted the UN regulations on cybersecurity and software updates, and the first UN regulation on the approval of the first use case for level 3 automated vehicles. And this regulation will probably be extended to trucks and buses this November. Our VP1 also adopted amendments to the 1968 Vienna Conventions to facilitate safe deployment of automated vehicles, the last one of which will most probably enter into force in spring next year. So all our work intends to support AI technologies to play a positive role in making significant progress in road safety. UNECE welcomes the focus on information sharing, data analysis, and capacity building in low and middle income countries, bridging the digital divide. So thank you, dear Hulin, Maria, and Jean, for spearheading this initiative and bringing us together today with a view to achieving the road safety related SDG targets UNEC looks forward to promoting inclusive approaches to digital capacity building. We really stand ready to collaborate with all UN agencies and stakeholders to maximize the impact of AI systems on road safety and sustainable transport. Thank you. Back to you, Bilal.
Thank you, Ms. Algeorova. Our collaboration with UNEC is certain to continue growing in strength, and we look forward to building on this collaboration in our contribution to this new AI for Road Safety initiative. Our new initiative is also fortunate to have the support of the Office of the United Nations Secretary General Envoy for Technology. Assistant Secretary General Maria Francesca Spatolizano has kindly offered us a video message highlighting the office's commitment to the goal of greater road safety, as well as its support for the new initiative. Colleagues, could you please roll the video?
Minister Shakshuk, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to be here today with my dear colleagues Ulin Zhao, Jean Todt, and Olga Algayerova to launch this important new initiative on artificial intelligence for road safety, a collaboration between the Office of the Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, the ITU, and the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. We are in the midst of a fourth industrial revolution, characterized by rapid digital innovation. This trend has become even clearer during the COVID-19 pandemic, as so many activities have been transferred online, taking place virtually. As we face new risks and opportunities in this increasingly digitized era, the United Nations has risen to the challenge, putting forward a bold vision of the digital future the world needs in the Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation last year, and now reinforced in his Common Agenda just released a few weeks ago. In both reports, artificial intelligence is highlighted as an area of particular concern where international cooperation is thus urgently needed. Indeed, we have seen how artificial intelligence has profoundly and irrevocably changed the way we live, from how we interact with machines and devices in our everyday lives to how we receive information and interact with others online. In the same vein, AI is already changing our daily driving behaviors and will continue to do so more and more. For instance, AI-driven intelligent driving technologies like lane keeping systems, emergency braking, and auto parking systems are now commonly found in vehicles you drive every day. AI has significant potential to improve road safety and help saving lives. Some research has suggested that by 2050, driverless cars could theoretically prevent up to 90% of traffic fatalities, as more than 90% of them are caused by human errors. More concretely, let's not forget that AI's applications go beyond autonomous vehicles and can also be used to optimize road and traffic management, or even provide warnings of potentially dangerous driving behaviors. At the same time, we must remain mindful of the other side of the coin, that like all technologies, AI is not a panacea. It poses risks as well as opportunities. From the need to ensure adequate safety standards and robust probing of AI systems themselves, to the possibility of human rights and privacy violations. We must ensure that any artificial intelligence systems are used in a trustworthy, secure, and ethical manner. Indeed, the Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation specifically names transportation as an area where digital trust and security is critical. In short, we must strengthen our ability to maximize the benefits of AI for road safety while curtailing its potential risks, and do so through a multi-stakeholder approach. Many of today's global AI discussions focus on more abstract yet fundamental issues such as ethics, and these are important. But so is making sure that we also explore and deliver practical, real-world technology outcomes that concretely and daily impact people's life. Today's initiative is a noteworthy effort in this direction, and my office is really pleased to work closely with all of you. I thank you for your attention.
Our thanks to the ASG Maria Francesca Spatolizano for the video. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we're privileged to welcome Excellency Moaz Chakchouk, Tunisia's Minister of Transport and Logistics, to share a national perspective on road safety and the digital age. Excellency Chakchouk, it's a great pleasure to welcome you today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bilal. Thank you very much to invite me for this event. Dear Francois, dear John Todd, dear Mr. John Todd, UN Secretary General, Special Envoy for Road Safety, dear Ms. Spatolizano, Assistant Secretary General for Office of the Secretary of General Envoy on Technology, and dear Ms. Alagoyanova, Executive Secretary for ENCE. I'm very pleased, as I said, to be with you today and to share some ideas from Tunisia about road safety and technology. I've been very interested in this topic, first of all, because of my backgrounds, both my former work with UNESCO, but also with all the discussions that we already had several years ago when we talked about artificial intelligence and how to harness the technology for several applications. Road safety is one important application that artificial intelligence can play a leading role, and we can use it for different applications. So I'm very pleased to share some ideas about it. First of all, let's highlight that for developing countries, situation is quite different from the developed perspective. Let's say, for example, when we deal with infrastructure, when we focus on a road infrastructure, a railway infrastructure, we forgot all the time about road safety when it comes to the use of technology. And I think here we need to highlight that we need to focus on digitizations as we think about, as we focus on infrastructure development and construction. So here it's an important issue, and digitization is not an option anymore. We need to develop new digital system for road safety, and this is possible today. However, there is some constraints. You know very well how things are. You know, for example, for the development of construction of cars, many cars today they dispose many technologies of options. This technology, we talk about connected cars, we talk about smart cars, but with all these cars are not very well suited to be used in developing countries. I take an example. When we have a GPS system, which is very well known in different countries, and particularly in Europe, GPS systems and maps are not all time available in developing countries. In Africa, we have to use Google apps, we can use maps, other maps with mobile technology to be able to use these maps to guide the cars. So we talk about assistance driving, but there is a lot of lack of digitization of road signs and all the systems that need to be updated here in developing countries. There is a need to make a new digital system for us, particularly with the signs, with the rules, and the algorithm cannot be executed in countries like mine even if we develop a very sophisticated car or a very sophisticated vehicle. This is a must, and we need to focus on that to bridge the gap between developing countries and developed countries in these issues. Another important issue is also related to the development of network. And here, 5G we talk about it, and I think here we need to foster the development of 5G and avoid all the gaps that could be also increased by the 5G development in some countries. You know very well the spectrum issues and all the particularly interoperability system and the networks and the bandwidth need to be available to make these IoTs, embedded cars, autonomous system cars could be also used in everywhere. Another aspect is about regulation as well. And I don't want to talk a lot, but here in Tunisia, for example, we are finalizing with a huge engagement from civil society, and the role of civil society here is important when we talk about road safety. There is a lot of work that has been achieved here in Tunisia because the civil society is really engaged on those issues, but we need to add to reform the legislation when it comes to, for example, use the digital systems, for example, to prevent accidents or to control the traffics or for the light traffic management, and all this systems need to be considered by the laws, because the law sometimes, and is in the case of Tunisia, for example, doesn't consider the automatic control, and the digital system are not very well considered when it comes to detect some violations. So this is the work that we are achieving here, and maybe it will be the law will pass about with including all these aspects. Another aspect when it call about, I heard the word autonomous systems and autonomous car. You know, when we launched the AI for Good, it was how many times highlighted that the importance of ethics. In my former position, we worked with UNESCO, and here I want to highlight the work that have been achieved by UNESCO in the elaboration of the recommendation on ethics. I think ethical framework and the human AI-based machines need to be highlighted as an important pillar when we talk about road safety. And of course, data will be used by these AI systems, but we need to be careful and of the results that will achieve this autonomous system when it comes to the algorithm that will be implemented. So all these aspects are very important. We know that the development of AI system for road safety is essential, but we need to really focus on many legislation aspects, and also a lot of development when it comes to the technology and the use of technology by our citizens and by the authorities in order to be able to be successful. Of course, I'm sure that if we achieve this, if we bridge the gap, if we try to not think only in a perspective from developed countries, I think that this will be a very successful application of AI, and we could really decrease the number of accidents and to also find solutions for our better future. Thank you very much. I will be reacting to some questions if there is. Thank you very much, Bilal.
Thank you very much, Excellency Moaz Chakchouk, Minister of Transport and Logistics in Tunisia, for your insights. I note in particular the need for minding the gap between developed and developing countries, the digitization, the network, the regulation, AI ethics, and the whole regulatory dialogue. Thank you for that, for your participation and for your insights today. I believe it's an excellent transition to the next phase of this webinar. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for the introductory remarks, welcoming the establishment of this AI for Road Safety initiative. Your support is highly appreciated. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Bryn Lacombe, Chief Strategy Officer of RoboRace, founder and director of the Autonomous Driving Alliance, and chair of the ITUT Focus Group on AI for Autonomous and Assisted Driving. Bryn, the floor is yours.
Super. Many thanks, Bilal, for the introduction, and thank you again to all our distinguished speakers for setting the scene right at the beginning. I think we have a few slides, if you're able to bring those up. So it gives me great pleasure to be involved in this launch. I started working with the AI for Good Global Summit back in 2018, and to see AI now being recognized as something that can impact road safety is incredibly fulfilling. And we have an amazing list of speakers to come up and talk to you, give you some insights. We'll keep the speeches short. There'll be lightning talks. We'll ask some questions. What I would ask is that if you have any questions for our speakers, then please post them in the Q&A on Zoom. If you move to the next slide, that would be great. This is our objective, really. How do we ensure that we can reduce road fatalities and serious injuries by 50% by 2030? And how can AI play a role? And this is the first time of convening a group together in order to address this question. If you move to the next slide, in our founding, what we've looked at is the safe system approach to road safety. And for those that aren't aware, these are the pillars that form that safe system approach. So road safety management, which was mentioned earlier, be able to collect the data, have the insights, be able to have rules and regulations, and then moving down into safer roads. So that's more on the infrastructure side, which Moez beautifully covered earlier with digital infrastructure for roads, safer vehicles, and we've touched upon ADAS functions, and we've touched upon autonomous vehicles, but more importantly, we'll have a contribution from the global NCAP, talking about safety standards for vehicles and how to communicate that to road users. Road users themselves, so safe behavior, and that's avoiding things like being drunk or distracted or drowsy while driving, for drivers in particular, and then post-crash response. And that's an area that I haven't personally looked at in very much detail, but we have some incredibly enlightening talks coming up in that regard. And then new for the second decade of road safety is the pillar 6, which is speed, which sits across all of those pillars. The amount of energy that the vehicle has is the square of the speed. And so if you remember from maths, it's every time you increase, it goes up by the square. So it's not just the difference between 30 and 40, it's that squared difference. And that has a significant impact. So it's fascinating now to see speeds in cities coming down to 20 miles an hour. So we're almost going back to where we were at the beginning of the, say, the 1900s. 20 is significantly safer if you're going to have a collision with pedestrians. So that's one of the reasons why speed has become a really important pillar for the new decade of road safety. So to keep everything moving along, I'd like to introduce Klaus Tingvoll, sometimes described as the godfather of Vision Zero. So we're very, very pleased to have Klaus here. He's an expert in the field of road safety, has been involved in this topic for a long time. Recently retired, I understand, Klaus, but still active in terms of your contribution, and is very, very valued. So I'd like to pass over to Klaus, please.
Thank you, Bryn, and Excellencies, colleagues and friends. I'll be very quick through my presentation. There's so many that are important that we can listen to. So if I can have the next slide, please, Tinu. We know very much about road safety. We know that we have a long way to go. We know that the road deaths, and in particular in low and middle income countries, has not declined the way they should. But now, entering a new decade, next slide please, there's a fantastic opportunity that we have been given. We are invited to the big 2030 agenda family on the same level as climate, health and equity. We actually belong to health and equity as well. And we are offered a number of very important mechanisms. I mean, in road safety, I think we can claim that we know the vaccine, but we are not very good in distributing it, in particular then to low and middle income countries. And the 2030 agenda gives us a fascinating number and fascinating new tools to distribute what we know. And there's one thing I need to declare, though, very clearly, is that it is no room for amateurs. This is prevention at a very high level we are talking about, and we can proudly claim that we can reach fairly close to zero if we just do the right things. Next slide, please. One thing that's really very important is that the private sector and the public sector are seen as allies, or one is not controlling the other one, but rather seeing each other as playing more or less this sort of same kind of role in the community. And one of them is, of course, the sustainability practices and the reporting that you expect from, in particular, large corporations. Next slide, please. And if you have followed sort of what's happened and what others like Jean Todt just mentioned in his speech, the Stockholm Declaration and the UN General Assembly resolution, they're very clear about things, and in this case about sustainability practices and reporting. And it said that the sustainability reporting and the practices, of course, then should be for the entire value chain of any organization. I mean, both sort of businesses as well as organizations in the public sector as well. Now, these are new words for us in our sector. Next slide, please. I mean, we in the road safety sector probably haven't heard so much about what is a value chain. And when you say the entire value chain, what do you mean in reality? Well, it's not that complex, and it's very complex to sort out a value chain, but to understand it's not that complex. It's really all the transports, everything on rubber wheels between the raw materials to the customers and also the reuse. And it also includes the use of those products and services that would be relevant in the road transport system. So more or less all corporations or all organizations has a sort of a supply chain where you sort of pick up raw materials and you build something from it and you distribute it to the customers. But organizations like vehicle manufacturers or suppliers and those who are dealing with personal transports and things like that would also have these sort of extra of reporting on, and that's the next word, if I have the next slide, report on their safety footprint. What happens? How many are killed or seriously injured within that value chain or the supply chain, plus what happens to all the customers? And this is what the UN General Assembly resolution really talks about. It is that the safety footprint of any organization should be reported and dealt with in terms of course, minimizing the number of those killed and serious injuries within that value chain. It's not blaming organizations, but it's inviting all organizations of the world to start doing things in this respect. And of course, it has got very much to do with low and middle income countries, because more or less all value chains and supply chains of a large corporation start somewhere in a low and middle income countries. And that is where we have most of the victims to these value chains. But by the way, every fatality in the world happens in at least one value chain, and it could be several, of course. Next slide, please. We're just now helping FIA to develop the first reporting framework for how you report on your value chain, your footprint, and associated issues. Next slide, please. And to that expected that all large corporations can report on both employees, the contracted parties, the third parties, I mean, who they hit, all the pedestrians and things like that, all the children, and also the customers. Next slide, please. And of course, we need the technology. If I could have the next slide, please. Of course, we need all the technology to help us out here. Yeah, next, please. Sorry, Jin. Yeah, thanks. Of course, we need the technology And if you see, this is one of the recommendations for the third ministerial conference. It talks about technology used by large corporations. It talks about applying them in low and middle income countries. If we take the next slide, please. One example being speeding, of course. And here we talk about that businesses, governments, and other fleet owners practice a zero tolerance approach to speeding. Bryn just mentioned the power two of the relation between speed and crashes. I can say that fatalities has a power of 4. So the zero tolerance using technology is expected that all organizations will apply very soon. Next slide, please. And if we talk about the vehicles and we talk about who is actually buying the world's vehicles and who are using them, you can, and especially if you look at commercial vehicles like trucks, buses, vans, and all those kinds sorts of vehicles, all of them are used in organizations, by corporations, in their supply chains, and should therefore be subject to safety, both rating, but also using the best one. And next slide, please. So this is, I think, what could be the sort of consequence or the understanding is that if we establish and assign a safety footprint to every large organization across the world and their value chains, it will put safety on the highest level of priorities and nothing else than in the family of health, climate, and equity. So understanding that by technology, by AI, by a lot of telecommunications, to measure your transport, to collect and measure the data about transports, to monitor the transports, and to, in the long run, or pretty early, I should say, control your transports. That's going to be something that should happen across the whole world if we just manage to find all the allies and invite the financial sector to really use sustainability reporting to guide those big organizations to really take on sustainability also in our field. Thank you very much. Over to you, Bryn.
Thank you very much, Klaus. I really appreciate those insights. When we first spoke, the safety footprint was something completely new to me. It wasn't something that I'd heard of before. So it's great to see your explanation. What do you think for the 2030 agenda? What do you think some of the challenges are around that? It seems like everything is kind of separated at the moment. Maybe the data is siloed into lots of different industries, and it's, how do we get that global picture and bring all of that data together to get those insights that are required?
Yeah, and that's a really relevant question, because collecting your safety footprint data is a real challenge. For your employees, it might work because you're already sort of doing that because it's sort of workplace injuries. But to collect the data for your contractors, but in particular the third parties and your customers, there's no sort of data source, and all the official statistics from all the nations would not be applicable here. So every large corporation would have to collect its data. And of course, you need quite sophisticated methods to do that. And I think AI, I think sort of technology-based collection of that kind of data, but also your monitoring data of speed, of other types of behavior, like, forward distance and things like that, across the world for all the transport is something that large corporations would be expected to apply very quickly. And I mean, we're working with a number of pilots, really large corporations, and they're keen, but it's not going to be easy, but it's going to have fantastic effects. And of course, we want to support now in the global plan and other things. We know that Jean Todt and the FIA is really supporting this work because they're actually setting this up. But of course, you expect everyone else also to be involved here, and in particular, the financial sector.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Excellent. No, thank you. And I think what's fascinating to me is the digitization of industry. That means some of this data can become accessible as long as we can then get access to it. So the devices to input the data, manage the data, they're coming. It's just now we want to access that to have a very different perspective on that data. And I think safety footprint is the right way to look at that. So really appreciate your contribution today, Klaus.
Thanks.
Super. Would like to continue around the topic of data. Actually, we have very honored to have Nan Tran here from the WHO. So when people talk about the statistics, 1.35 million fatalities around the world, 50 million serious injured, the WHO is the body that coordinates all of that information. And Nan, I think, could you give us some more insight into the role that you have, the role that WHO has in terms of providing that global picture? Because if we're trying to achieve the 2030 agenda, we need to be able to measure ourselves against those numbers. So it'd be fascinating to hear your views on that.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Bryn. And just a very note to say that it's a real pleasure to be able to join this conversation with all of the distinguished guests and Excellency from Tunisia. I actually just wanted to start by giving a quick overview of the relevance of AI and technology in this next decade of action for road safety. And if you just go to the next slide really quickly, as many of you already know, and has already been stated by a number of the colleagues, the decade of 2021 to 2030 has been declared as the second decade of action for road safety. And with that, it has extended the target of reducing deaths and serious injuries by 50%. A mandate was given to the UN regional commissions and WHO to prepare a global plan of action. And I just wanted to just quickly look at that and to contextualize why at WHO and within this context, we consider AI and technology to be such a critical component of this next decade, in addition to the question, Brendan, you've just raised about data. Next slide, please. One of the main points that we wanted to raise to make in this new global plan, of course, is that the target of 50% reduction in the number of deaths and injuries is actually possible, and it's possible through the implementation of a safe system approach. And one of the key points that we wanted to leave people with was that in order to do that, leveraging the co-benefits of other SDG targets, gender, climate, urban health, and ensuring and optimizing the technologies available was actually one of the critical means of achieving this goal. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this, but I wanted to just briefly summarize the plan. So the plan basically lays out three things. It lays out what to do, it lays out how to do it, and it lays out who should actually do this. And I want to emphasize I want to build on a point that Klaus just made earlier about the fact that we have the vaccine and that it's been a challenge for us to actually get that vaccine distributed. And in some ways, this is not that different than the experience that we're having with COVID. We literally do have a vaccine, but yet we're unable to really get it out to the rest of the world where it's actually needed most. And this is essentially an implementation issue. So in this next plan, in the first plan, as it has already been highlighted, we actually emphasize sort of the key pillars of what needs to be done. And in this plan, we've added to that by bringing in an emphasis on how to do it and who should do that. And if you look within this graph, you'll see that in the how to do that, we actually talk specifically about technology and the need for us to be able to optimize and benefit from evolving technologies. And this is especially relevant because we want to also, in this section on how to do this, have a greater focus on low and middle income countries, because that's where the greatest burden of deaths and injuries are occurring. And these 2 points actually go hand in hand, because I think that when we think about technology, we often think about sort of the ultra modern cities and the ultra high techs, but we actually forget that there are a lot of basic technologies, I think, as Jean Todt has mentioned in his opening remarks, such as even having access to a universal number that actually can have a huge impact. And these are the types of technologies that could be easily applied in these types of settings. And then the final point is just to reiterate what Klaus has just said about the importance of engaging with the industry and private sector in terms of actually who needs to take action. One of the main messages that we're highlighting in this new global plan is the importance of a shared responsibility for road safety. That is to say, everyone has a role to play, and that we need to ensure that that role results in a positive impact and not a negative impact. Next slide, please. So I think the point here is that, we often think about technology, and these are the obvious applications of technologies that we've already heard about in terms of the many vehicle safety features that have already been described. Next slide. one of the things that I wanted to introduce and to remind us that is that the technology and artificial intelligence also comes in a lot of different forms. One of the points that I often make is that if you think about the transformation of transportation and procurement and delivery over the last 10 years, it hasn't come about because of vehicle safety improvements. It's actually, I would say, one of the most influential technological advancements, technological innovations that has changed transformation was actually the smartphones. And with the smartphone, we got Uber, we got Linked, we got all of these applications that enable transportation services to evolve and change in a way that previously wasn't possible. So it's not always thinking about, for example, a technology that's directly applied to a vehicle or a road. It is actually being open to actually benefiting and optimizing technologies which we may not think about. And again, I use the example of Uber and Lyft and the myriad of applications and now delivery services that have been made possible simply because of a revolution in terms of the smartphone. And again, that smartphone was not developed with the intention of changing transportation, but it ultimately did. And we can also imagine how these technology are changing even mobility itself in terms of the proliferation of micromobility. All of these things are changing the way we move about. And again, it all changes how we think about mobility and transport and ultimately safety. Next slide. Now, getting back to bring your question, of course, this is one of the most important, one of the things that we care about most at WHO, because of the fact that WHO has been mandated to monitor progress towards this goal of a 50% reduction. Now, in our latest reports, we show that we estimate, in fact, that there's a roughly 1.3 million people that die as a result of road traffic crashes each year. However, when we look at the numbers that are officially reported to us, that is the numbers that governments send to us, we see that it's roughly half of that. So government's official tallies actually total roughly 650,000 deaths per year. So there's a huge gap between the numbers that we estimate and the numbers that we actually that are reported to us. And of course, this is due to the fact that in many countries, data systems are not very strong, and there's a lack of data infrastructure. Civil registration and vital statistics isn't actually, in many countries, it's not working. And therefore, we are actually trying to find new ways of actually consolidating data. Really, the greatest challenge when we talk about road safety data is the fact that data is collected in numerous different places. In some countries, it's collected by the police. In some countries, it's collected by firefighters. It's collected also by the health facilities. It's collected by, insurance, private insurance companies. So when countries have good civil registration and vital statistics, what those systems do is they consolidate data from all different kinds of sources. And that enables them to actually have a more robust reporting because they capture and they link the different cases that are sometimes reported in one sector, but not the other. So now what we are doing, and we've had actually quite interesting experiences in many countries, including Tunisia, and most recently in Senegal and Zambia, where we are manually linking different data sources. And one of the keys to being able to do this more effectively and at scale is to actually benefit from technology. So using artificial intelligence and using digital applications to link this data has been a huge success. And we've been able to show, for example, that countries have actually been able to see, for example, where the underreporting of the data is occurring, and they're now able to improve their estimates. In Thailand, they improved their estimates by 50% by using these methods of linking data. In Zambia, they've improved their estimates by 2 times. It's 2 times higher than what it was before. And the final point that I wanted to make in relation to this whole point about data is that we're also now seeing countries and different groups experiment in terms of using, for example, mobile technology to apply crowdsourcing as a means of actually capturing deaths. Historically, we've only ever thought about reporting deaths by data collection by police or by health facilities or by other formal institutions. Now we're also seeing that these applications are allowing, and if you will, democratizing, if you will, the reporting of deaths and crash by people. It's not so different, if you will, from what Google is already doing or other sort of these mapping services are doing in terms of identifying crashes. And the next, I think, leap that we're trying to think about is how do we actually optimize and benefit from that big data that's being collected? How do we potentially encourage crowdsourcing as a way of actually collecting data on road traffic crashes and injuries and potentially deaths? So these are actually really interesting questions that we're posing and that we're asking ourselves. And I believe over the next decade, we will see more and more experimentation with these types of approaches. And I really do think that AI and technology has a big part, will be a big part of the answer and of this new technological sort of the data revolution that we will see in the coming decades. And it's my personal hope that at the end of this decade, we will not only have reached the target of a 50% reduction in the number of deaths and injuries, but we will actually have reliable data that's coming from all countries that show that that reduction is actually reflected in their own data systems. And they're not only relying on estimates that are being produced by WHO. So that's really, I think, the one of the many ways that this is the opportunities that lay ahead for us. And I join other speakers in conveying my enthusiasm and delight in being able to participate. And I look forward to continuing these discussions as we move forward in the decade. Thanks.
Excellent. And I mean, that is a fantastic, there's a lot of information crammed into a very short space of time. So I really appreciate that. But I think it's really important that you recognize that, yes, we can put the technology into cars. Yes, we could have it in smart infrastructure, but the proliferation of mobile phone devices, which are for all road users, is a really interesting and maybe underexplored area for capturing data. And I know some police forces are adopting the use of mobile phones to better report. We have some speakers coming up later on from the World Bank that are talking about the crowdsourcing of data that you've just mentioned, the ability to have accurate emergency response numbers being used, but also then the location of where you are. All of that, I think, is fascinating. But again, it kind of centers on the mobile phone, which you've already highlighted. So that was really great to see. I think what would be good now is if we run the poll, the first poll, if that's possible. I don't know, my ITU colleagues are there. So we had the first poll is really looking at how do we all feel AI could impact those safe system pillars that we mentioned right at the beginning. So the safer roads, safer vehicles, safer road users, post-crash response speeds, the road safety management. And you have the option to select either all of the above or none of the above. So anyone that you think is your preference, or all of the above or none of the above. So if you're able to complete, I've just seen a note say hosts and panelists can't vote. I was looking forward to voting and sharing my opinion on there. I have the luxury maybe of being able to share that with you verbally afterwards once we have the responses. So we'll just leave that there for a few moments. Nan, is there any further comments that you would like? Looking at those pillars, are there any ones that in particular that you would focus on, or do you find that it differs in country and state of development, for example?
I think it really does depend on the context in which we're working on. I do want to emphasize 2 points, and one is that there is a greater focus in this coming decade on low and middle income countries. And one of the reasons why we're emphasizing technology is because we realize that there's a possibility for many of these countries to leapfrog, if you will, or avoid some of the same pitfalls. And we actually see in other parts of the world, in Africa and Asia, that the uptake of technology is much faster than it is in Europe or North America even. Services like paying through your mobile phones have existed in Africa and Asia for years, and only recently in the last 5 years has it begun to sort of been taken up by the Europeans and North Americans. And so the point I'm making here is that there is a real opportunity for us to be able to leverage some of these technologies and to encourage countries in these settings to actually leapfrog. But they also, I think, eliminate the need for some of the types of data infrastructure that we've often been thinking about. When we think about data systems, we often think about a need for having, very, very robust data infrastructure. I'm not saying that that's not important, but I'm saying is that we are realizing that it is actually possible to actually improve, for example, reporting of road traffic deaths and crashes without actually having to go through this process of making sure that we have, a very strong data infrastructure and having good civil registration and vital statistics. All of those things are absolutely desirable. But in the meanwhile, there are immediate things that can be done. And that is actually one of the messages that we want to leave the global community with in terms of this new decade and this new global plan, is that there's a lot of things. And the idea is not to suggest that everything has to be done and everything has to be done now, and we need lots of resources. The point is that there are a lot of things that need to be done, but we can actually do a lot of it now by being more creative, by being more efficient in terms of how we leverage resources, and finally, by optimizing and benefiting from technology and artificial intelligence.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate that, Manan. And thank you very much for joining us and setting the scene. It's been very beneficial. So interesting on the poll result, we're still focusing mainly on vehicles or all of the above. I like the all of the above. One of the challenges with vehicles and roads is obviously the rate at which those technologies can be deployed. So we'll move on and we'll find out some more information as we go through. So it's my pleasure to introduce Liliana. Liliana works for one of the regional observatories, so is responsible for the collection of data within a particular region, and she's here to share her insights into that. Thank you very much, Liliana.
Thank you, Brun. It is very a rare chance for me to hear such a good speeches on the topic of AA, of artificial intelligence, and I'm grateful to be part of this panel. Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers, colleagues, and friends. Here we are to talk how artificial intelligence will help or can help road safety. But the question that I'm facing for couple of years now, and also currently, it is, are we talking too early for this topic? So the answer from my point of view, it is sure not. Artificial intelligence is part of road safety, although in some cases we might not be aware or might not recognize as such. We have already entered in a decade of rapid technological developments, and in the same time, we're entering in the second decade of actions on road safety. So we have new goals, we have a new vision. Counting of fatalities, it's not easy for many countries, in particular for low and middle income countries. And we heard previously a detailed explanation from Nan that even what he was saying in his presentation can be confirmed from myself on a regional point of view, that there exist and not rare, but big differences between counting of fatalities by World Health Organization and what the national reporting is. And why is that? So, of course, there is a lot happening behind the data that are collected, for which we should be aware and understand the size of the data, the accuracy, reliability, and last but not least, their availability. Regional approaches and platforms like road safety observatories are with significant importance in this aspect. And why? These are platforms that are aiming to monitor road safety targets, but also offering a tailored solution and contribute to the improvement and harmonized, and I want to emphasize, harmonize the road safety data in the region and also at the international level. Usually observatories are compounded from two pillars, and most of them have this structure. One is data and the other policy, and they are well interlinked one to each other. And where artificial intelligence can help here? All road safety observatories has a work plan, And that work plan is based on the pillars that are of the safe system approach. So infrastructure, user behaviors or KPIs on the user behaviors, vehicle safety, post-crash care, but also there is a pillar or a part of the program that is contributing to the research part. So this data that we're collecting, we're using them to link with the policy measures. In my case here, we're linking to the regional policy measures, to the regional action plans, but also the data can be linked at the national level to the national action plans or to a city level. So we should see them on different sizes. When it comes to the geolocation, honestly, most of the countries does not collect data with GPS locations, which leads to an unknown, uncertain area of the interventions. In general, geolocations is used in a very limited way of analysis. And when we talk for GPS coordinates, in the first sight, it comes to us just the location. But we can do more than just creating some black spots maps that are showing us the location where the crashes are happening. And here artificial intelligence is with a tremendous help. Let's take an example on the road infrastructure, which it is the most common one with the risk maps, black spots based on the bad infrastructure condition, let's say. Artificial intelligence system will help to collect and prioritize data such as the road surface conditions, signage markings, signal details, type of vehicles, model of use, and utility assets. And how we link that to the policy, then we are looking to the adopted 3-year road safety inspection plans, road safety audit plans, whether they are continuously inspecting or auditing the roads in the region, and whether they are based on specific guidelines or the law on the road safety, it is linked to the directives. In our case, we're linking them to the EU directives. And the other example that I would like to mention here, it is on the black spots that are caused of driver behaviors. Recently, we have heard that the safe system approach is very linked to the KPIs. And these KPIs are, several of them are explaining the driver behavior. So how can we fix these black spots that are caused from driver behaviors? We can take preventive actions based on predictive crash maps that analyze historical data and incoming data to pinpoint the high-risk areas. These maps make possible to issue warnings to the drivers to be extra careful in these areas. And for more, when we do such a thing, so authorities can take measures to double up road safety measures in these points or in these junctions, in these cities. But from the other side, we benefit to helping drivers develop safety habits as a way of life, which is very difficult to achieve it in other manners that we're trying to do. So this brings us to change of patterns, and being that in just a junction, in a city, in a country, or in a region, which certainly will be reflected to the policy measures. So let's use artificial intelligence and transform road safety, and I'm certain that will help us to save lives on the roads. Thank you.
Excellent. Many thanks, Liliana. And I think it's very often that people assume that GPS accurate location information is available. So thank you for highlighting that that isn't always the case, and the value of being able to connect that geospatial information. I think that's really important. I think just for the sake of time, because I've just checked my timing and we are running a little bit short, but if you don't mind, we'll move on to the next speaker. So we have Junji Tang, who's joining us from Amazon Web Services. Junji, are you there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Now you have the most professional microphone set up as well, so that you win the prize for that. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Okay. Thanks.
Perfect.
Yep. First, thanks. So my name is Junji Tang. Thanks, Brian. So my name is Junji Tang. I'm a principal consultant from Amazon Web Services Professional Services. So I'm based in Munich. So my focus is data analytics and autonomous driving. Together with BMW, we presented Cloud Data Hub and Autonomous Driving Data Lake in reInvent 2019 and 2020. Today, I will give an overview about our service offering for the autonomous vehicle development workflow and the reference architecture for the autonomous vehicle data lake. Next slide. So let's start with the typical workflow of autonomous vehicle development. The diagram on the top shows the steps, much of which are common in any autonomous driving projects. I will start from left to right and highlight a few challenges and our solution for them. So we can begin with the data acquisition. For a typical test vehicle fleet with 50 cars distributed in the United States, Europe, and China, it will generate 2 petabyte data each day. In some of our projects, we cooperate with our partner DXC to collect the data in 3 different regions and then ingest into our storage service S3 bucket. For the data management, processing, and analytics, we have billions of video frames, but only 5 to 10% are useful. Use Amazon managed workflow for Apache Airflow, we are able to set up a centralized and intuitive workflow orchestration across multiple systems. For the simulation, we containerize the simulation software for some of our customers. For the road safety, we can verify if the emergency brakes happened in time and on the right place. On the bottom of the slides, I will talk about the AI/ML framework and the spatialized compute. For the AI/ML framework, SageMaker as the integrated development and the deployment platform is very successful, especially SageMaker Studio, SageMaker Data Wrangler, and the SageMaker MLOps becomes very popular in the last years. For specialized compute, Amazon EC2 is able to meet those compute needs across CPUs, Intel and AMD, and the GPUs like V100 and A100, as well as with AWS custom silicon such as AWS Graviton, CPU, and AWS Inferentia. This is a special chip designed for our customer inference needs. Next slide. So this is a reference architecture of data pipelines to process data in ROSBAC and MDF4 format. So ROSBAC and MDF4 are 2 common data formats for the data collected by test vehicles, including cameras and other sensors. So we heard about a lot of data sharing and data collection in the other speakers already. So this reference architecture is described in 10 steps. So I will do a quick run. Step 1, AWS Outpost as edge device can process raw data in on-prem data centers. Bad quality data is not uploaded to the storage service S3 to save further costs. Step 2, we can upload and process vehicle telemetric data in near real time with AWS IoT Core and Amazon Kinesis Data 5 hosts in AWS. So this is a good addition to ROSBAC and MDF4 files. It is used to validate the recorded data. Then we divide it into 2 different pipelines. The first pipeline is step 5 and 6. It's about the data enrichment, data synchronization, and the scenario extraction, like pedestrian in the lane or cut-in scenario in highway. Both are relevant for the road safety. In step 7, we have the data catalog with Glue data catalog and Neptune. This is our graph database for data lineage. Another pipeline contains step 8 and 9 for image processing, labeling, and model training. We can use automated labeling for raw data with Amazon SageMaker Ground Truth. So the workflow in Ground Truth support different use cases, including 3D point clouds, videos, images, and text. The labeling of Ground Truth used as input for model training. So this is fundamental as an AI for road safety. Step 10 is analytics and visualization tools, including KPI reporting and RVs and WebVids to visualize the ROSBAC files. So this is a very quick run. So if you want to know more about autonomous driving development workflow or autonomous driving data lake architecture, we published 4 blogs in August this year and 5 GitHub repositories. You can try it out yourself or reach out to me if you have any questions or suggestions. Thanks a lot. So now I hand over to Bring.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Junji. That's an incredibly complex. And I think what's actually really encouraging and what we've seen a lot from automated driving, maybe the impact of automated driving by 2030 won't be that significant, but the infrastructure that's been put in place to cope with automated driving could be very significant. So I think that the structure that you have with AWS and the cloud, if we're able to then harness that now to work with existing road safety data, it could be incredibly powerful. But the infrastructure is there, and I think that's what's really encouraging for me to see.
Thanks. Happy to continue the initiative. So actually, this is an open source project also. So we actually can work together to improve the road safety in the future.
Excellent. And I think a lot of sometimes we forget that. I think you mentioned it. Automated driving captures a lot of data, but ADS systems that are perceiving the environment are also being able to capture a lot more data. And so we'll find out more about how that can be harnessed from Mobileye coming up a bit later on in the session. So thanks very much again, Junji. For our next speaker, we have Sveta from World Bank, who will touch a little bit on what Nam was mentioning earlier about the value of crowdsourcing data and the work that the World Bank have been doing in supporting road safety. And they are one of the biggest advocates within the road safety community. So we're very lucky to have Sveta with us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Brennan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be part of this launch event and the work that's coming forward. As Brennan mentioned, my name is Sveta Malusheva. I'm an economist in the Development Impact Evaluation Department at the World Bank, where I lead our program of transport impact evaluations, iConnect. And today I'll be talking specifically on our work in road safety and how we're working to leverage artificial intelligence as well as new data sources to address road safety. Next slide, please. So it was already laid out by Nan and other speakers. One of the big challenges that we faced as we started working in the space of impact evaluation road safety is on data and understanding the problem. So while Nan mentioned the figure of 50% of WHO estimated fatalities being reported in official statistics, when you focus on low-income countries, the number actually goes down to 17%. So really there's quite a lot of data that is missing from fatalities and also more broadly on road traffic crashes. And so if we don't have information on when, where, and why these crashes are happening, it's very hard to know what are the right solutions, and especially when we have scarce financial resources, how we can best leverage those. Next slide. So the approach that we've been taking is in seeing how we can innovate in data measurement. And this can be in a number of different spaces in road safety, both in terms of looking at crash locations as well as characteristics, and in the post-crash space as well. And I won't have time to touch upon all the different ways in which we're trying to innovate in measurement, but I'll give just a few examples to illustrate how much we can use new technology and AI to support in improving the data available on road safety. Next slide. The first example is looking at crash locations and timing, and this was brought up by other speakers as well, especially Liliana talked about the importance of understanding this and the fact that there is limited data on especially the GPS of where crashes are happening. And we piloted 2 different methods in Nairobi, Kenya to see how we can improve on this. So the first is working with the official statistics. So in Kenya, like in many other countries, the reports are actually paper reports. So you have all this information that's collected, and yet it's never used because it's sitting in piles. And so we worked with the police service to digitize over 10,000 police records to pull out and extract those variables and information that could then actually be analyzed to provide policymakers with the information they need to understand when, where, and why crashes are happening. Now, this was initially done manually, but we're working to see how we can use machine learning to automate this process so that this can be done on a much larger scale and across countries that still may have this historical data in paper. And even as they work to digitize the data collection, we can use that historical data to already help us understand how we may need to apply different policies. Additionally, as has been mentioned, oftentimes the official reports may not contain all of the crashes and information, all of the crashes that may be happening. And so we explored the use of crowdsourcing and specifically using social media and Twitter to complement the official records. In Nairobi, we focused on one specific Twitter handle, Mathri Route, where people will report on crashes as well as traffic more broadly. And we were able to scrape over 850,000 tweets. We manually coded a year of data to act as a truth data set. And we use this to develop a machine learning algorithm that helps us identify and geolocate where crashes are happening, that then again could complement those official records. Next slide, please. Additionally, we're also interested in understanding the characteristics of crashes, so not just where they're happening, and that's where we can leverage already existing, for example, cameras, CCTV cameras that might be in a location to study behaviors and near misses. Crashes are potentially rare events, but we can actually study the behaviors that are happening that could lead to a crash. And so we're doing this work in Addis Ababa, testing how we can leverage video and AI technology in order to, again, create data sets that allow us to better understand the road safety situation. Next slide. And all these different types of data can be brought together and used in real time. So specifically looking at the COVID-19 crisis, we know that in many countries, policies were put in place to try to decrease mobility and spread of the disease. And you can imagine that will have impact on road safety. And so we were able to bring together a number of different data sources to look at this. So first, we wanted to see if mobility is actually decreased when these policies are put in place. And you can see in the top left, there's data from Google Mobility reports showing how mobility changes over time. This is again in Nairobi, Kenya. We can then see, well, what does that mean in terms of congestion, what's happening on the roads? And so then we used Waze data to look at how traffic delays are changing. We see a large decrease in those traffic delays. And then we can see how that then reflects in road traffic crashes. And while we see crashes decreasing, actually one of the issues that arises is that speeds are increasing as congestion decreases. And so then that could lead to more fatal crashes. And so when we have this data and we have these systems set up, we can react in real time as there's new things that are changing and new challenges that we need to handle, such as the COVID-19 pandemic and policies put in place. Next slide. So we can bring together all of these different data sources to produce data systems that can allow us to produce analytics on both black spots, characteristics, as well as post-crash outcomes. This can help to inform the design of more targeted and more effective interventions, and also can generate knowledge to help us understand what works. So once we have that data in place, we can actually measure which interventions are working and ensure that we're using our resources in the most effective way so that we can reach the SDG to decrease fatalities by 50%. Stop there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sveta. That's really, really insightful. And I think it's again showing that the power of that crowdsourcing data and the power of mobile phone data acquisition to be able to provide new insights. And I think as we start this new decade of action on road safety, that's really encouraging to me. As I think it was John Todd mentioned at the beginning, we have new tools available for this decade, and really this initiative is how do we harness those? So we look forward to collaborating with the World Bank going forward on that. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Excellent. And I wondered whether His Excellency Moez Chachuk is still with us at the moment. Moez, are you there? Sorry to spring a question on you, but maybe if he's unavailable, we'll come to him later. Okay, so with that, I was planning to have a short break here. So if anyone does need to go for a break, I would suggest it is a good time to go for a break. However, we do have a very interesting presentation and use case from TRL, which I'd like to continue with for the sake of time. So I think we have John and Tony will be co-presenting. So John and Tony, if you're there, it's a fascinating case study, and I'm looking forward to you sharing it with everybody else on the call. So. John, I can't hear you, so you are unmuted, but we can't hear your sound. No, we can't hear you at the moment. So we can see you talk, but can't hear you. And it was working earlier, wasn't it? So maybe if Tony could continue.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you, Tony. And then John can join once technical issues are resolved.
That's right. So next slide.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Tony. Yes, we can, John. Sorry.
Okay, I'll go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so what we have is a case study of better data collection and how that can be used. And it really fits in very nicely with a lot of the themes that previous presenters have spoken about. This is focusing more on the public sector response to road safety, which remains really, really important. So the designers and the people who provide the road system. Next slide, please. And really, this is just to emphasize that crash data, whether it's police data or hospital data, is really, really fundamental to safe systems. It's the kind of the ultimate measure of whether we're being successful or not. And the police crash data is the thing that has provided the intelligence that on pretty much everything we know about road safety today. Next slide, please. So what we've got in Himachal Pradesh is pretty good quality police-derived crash data with imagery of the crash locations, but also critically good GPS locations where the crashes are actually happening. What we're doing is using the intelligence from analysing this good crash data to set a range of safe system strategies in a large pilot project, which will then identify successful solutions, which will be rolled out much more widely across the state as a whole. Anyone who's got experience of doing this, please get in touch, because there isn't really a lot of concrete information out there at the current time about how to do this in a low and middle income country. The point about the crash data is that safe systems really emphasizes collecting as much and wide sources of data. And that's been true for the way that we approach road safety for the last 30, 40 years. But really, AI needs good data that you can link together as well. So there's a real crossover and alignment there, which we need to make more of. What I'll do is I'll hand over to Tony. He's going to tell you what the data shows and give you an indication of the quality of the information. Tony, thanks.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right, so TRL has implemented a crash data system, which is known as IMAP, in Himachal Pradesh in around 2014. Himachal Pradesh is a state in India. It has got 7.5 million people living there. Road network is at an altitude of anywhere between 3,000 to 8,000 foot above sea level. So it's a hilly region. It is a low-income state within a middle-income country, you can say. What happened after the implementation is that the police, like in any low and middle-income countries, were collecting data using paper-based approach, paper pencil-based approach. What this project has done is a significant change in institutional process where police, a complete police force, the state's police force, around 300 police stations and 1,000 police force, they switched to digital data collection. That means they collect now crash data real time using a mobile app from the crash site. Next slide, please. So what we will try to prove here is crash insights, which we had from last 5 years. Around nearer to 20,000 crash records has been captured with GIS coordinates in the system. And what we want to present is crash insights, which may challenge conventional road safety understanding from the data. So we looked at, if you look at across the state, the crash types in the last 5 years, you can see 75% of all the crashes comes under 3 collision types, which is run-off road, which is single vehicle collision, head-on collision, and pedestrian crashes. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. okay, so what happened? What's happening here is police, in all these 20,000 crash records, police are collecting pictures from the crash scene. And it's all been geo-coded and also been geolocated. So as a data analyst, I can see the real time, the pictures of where the crashes have happened, etc. Yeah, and next slide, please. So we look at, we identified that, okay, these are the 3 major crash types which the government should focus, put their money in. And we look at one of the crash type, run-off road, what's happening. We looked at where the run-off road crashes are happening. And we found out that it is in low category, low volume, single lane roads. It's not in high traffic or high speed roads. It's low volume, low speed, single lane roads. More than 50% of the run-off crashes and consequent deaths and serious injuries happening due to run-off road crashes occur on the network. Yeah, next slide, please. Right. So now this is very interesting. Our traditional wisdom, a conventional wisdom in a single vehicle run-off road crashes is that, okay, when a vehicle negotiates a curve in a high speed and they lose its control, and then we end up in accidents and end up in crashes. So curve fitting, retrofitting curves, putting crash barriers, etc. on curves is a kind of capsule for run-off road crashes on the network. That's it. That's what we do where data is not available. But what we have found here is that more than 50% of the crashes are occurring on straight roads. Run-off road crashes are occurring on the straight roads. So you can see from this graph, that challenges our basic understanding of how run-off crashes occur. So that means we need to look beyond the infrastructure. You need to look beyond why this is happening on the network. Next slide, please. Right, and then we look at vehicle category. What are the different type of vehicle types involved in crashes? So if you look at that, okay, motor cars involved in more than 50% of the total run-off crashes, followed by jeeps, another variety of motor cars. Buses are very little involved in total number of crashes, but when you look at total number of deaths and serious injuries, buses come second in the total crash mix, in the total vehicle mix. That does mean that buses has to be given priority in interventions. Bus safety has to be taken as center stage in this particular state because of the potential of buses ending up in multiple casualties in the event of a single crashes. And we have cases like one bus accident, bus crash leading to 20 to 25 people dying on the road, particularly school children. So this is one of the areas where we have to focus from the data that, okay, focus on buses because it kills end up in multiple fatalities. Okay, next slide, please. We look at, again, okay, the run-off road crashes we know. Now we look at pedestrian crashes. That is one of the major 3 crash types in the state again. Again, this particular one, 70% of the run-off road crashes occur in rural areas, which is again challenges our conventional wisdom because we tend to focus on urban areas where data is not available. That, okay, because pedestrians flock in urban areas, more pedestrian crashes where pedestrians are in high number, etc. But in this state, 70% of the crashes where pedestrians are involved are occurring in rural areas. And 75% of those crashes are in daylight conditions, not at night, right? Okay, and next slide, please. We look this is very interesting. Another slide, 30% of the pedestrian deaths and serious injuries in both urban and rural areas are caused due to collision with motorized two-wheelers. And this is a case, this is wherever I have studied data in India, this is a case. There are high number of two-wheelers in the traffic mix, but why pedestrians are dying because of its collision with two-wheelers are not really fully understood. We have literature available across the world from the developed world. What will be the impact speed of a car having a chance for a pedestrian death and serious injury? You know, we have charts available, we have literature, studies available. But what causes a motorized two-wheeler crash involving pedestrian, leading to pedestrian deaths and serious injury, is not fully understood. This is one area of research we would need. But I just wanted to show that this is a serious problem in low and middle income countries if you consider the case of India as an example. Next slide, please. right? We looked at pedestrian on the type of road network. Where is this happening? We have seen in the earlier slide that ran of road crashes on low volume, low traffic, single lane road network. But the pedestrian deaths or pedestrian crashes are mostly occurring, more than 50% again, on high volume, high spec national highways. And if you look at the pedestrian action, this again challenges our wisdom. More than 70% of the pedestrian deaths and serious injuries occur while pedestrian is walking along the road, not while crossing the road, right? So because in India, if I say among the road safety practitioners, the focus is on provide good crossing points, attention is all on crossing. The talk, general road safety talk goes to crossing points. But no, along the road, there is a problem. So what is causing that problem? Is it lack of space? Is it something else? That is again, which needs to be understood. So walking along the road, 70% in rural areas, this is what HP data shows. Next slide, please. Okay, so this, you can see all of this capture, different collision types are, all of these nearer to 20,000 crash records have been captured. The GIS locations available. We can do any kind of queries and come up with plot the crashes across the network. What is the next level is that with the 5 years of crash data, this is the right time where we need to get into a predictive modeling of where we can predict the crashes based on the road environment and based on different types of crashes we are seeing on the network. So this is the right time where we want to take the data to the next level to introduce certain artificial intelligence and develop solutions for this going forward. Yes, I will leave to my colleague again, John, to conclude the last slide. John, please.
Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going. Okay, so the kind of so what point, I think AI has, as many people have pointed out, real potential to help us as road safety practitioners, and particularly towards the UN second decade of action. But I think there's two ways that you can look at AI. One is how can it help us replace manual aspects which are done badly by human beings at the moment. So we've got the police using mobile devices to take both photographs and to get really more than accurate enough locations for the crashes, but they still need to fill in fields, and they don't always do that particularly well. But can we move away from that? Can we get them just to go to the scene, take some good photographs, get a location, and then link that data to other data sets that maybe the engineers have, road inventory data sets, road condition data, which most agencies tend to have these days. But there's some more exciting approaches, and I think they were discussed earlier by Sveta, I think. Crash data within safe system context has got a little bit of a dirty connotation because it's linked to this reactive approach, looking for black spots and aspects like that. That is still relevant and required where you've got these kind of problems. And it's less a problem in high-income countries now. But as Tony said, what we want is to move towards incorporating this good data into more proactive models of to predict where your problems will be in the future. I'm sure Rob McInerney will be talking about these aspects in relation to IRAP, which kind of does that already. And it's incredibly important. We need much more data, so we need speed and flow data. And I think people, organizations that have apps and people carrying mobile phones about have data that we can use, but I think practitioners really need to use that. Another thing about crash data is it's got a horrible underlying statistical distribution. The image on the right-hand side, the graph, is from the TRL work, which kicked off accident predictive modeling. And maybe AI can get over the problems with this statistical distribution, give us better ways to monitor and evaluate robustly, which is challenging at the moment. I think I've said pretty much what I wanted to say. Sorry, I was a bit flustered at the beginning, but thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tony. I think the insights that you have, once you have the data, are really enlightening. And as you say, Tony, they're kind of counterintuitive to what people might be expecting. And that really does show the value of collecting data and analyzing that correctly. I believe the next stage of your project is now to look at the implementation, so more on the policy side of, okay, well, now we have that data, we have the insights, what are the effective measures that we need to introduce in the region? Is that correct?
Yeah, we are using the data to guide a series of safe system-based strategies, which I don't see too much information out there that people have really done this in low and middle income countries today. So again, if people have, get in contact with us, please. And these, we'll be monitoring the safe systems strategy through intermediate indicators. But it's really useful that they're guided to the right risks, the real risks, by this good crash data. And I think that's missing at times where people are trying to apply safe systems, particularly for low middle income countries.
Excellent. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think the other thing I picked up from our earlier discussion was that you need hyper localized data. You can't just say this is India, you can't just say this is the region. It's kind of like you have to look at the specifics for a particular area itself. And I think that's one of the things I'll take away. So really appreciate your time today. Very useful.
Thanks.
I wondered if we are now joined again by His Excellency Mois Chakchuk, if he's available. Mois, are you there?
Thank you. Yeah, I missed your questions, and so I will be happy to address them if you remind me.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you very much for joining us again. I just wondered, like, partway through now, we've seen a lot of really interesting interventions. But from your perspective, what would be the first steps that you would like to see for low and middle income countries when it comes to AI for road safety? What are the practical next steps that you would like to see?
Yeah, I think there is quite a number of challenges, and what is important here is when we deal about artificial intelligence and road safety is the data. There is no data available in low income countries, in Africa particularly, and also some data are needed to be able to build this new system, this digital system that can save, for example, lives when it comes to near the school, for example, when you have a speed limit, or with red lights, or with the crossings, and so many aspects can be dealt when we deal with the data, with the digitizations. So I think telecom operators, startups, car manufacturers, the governments local governments need to work together, including the civil society, to be able to build this data and to construct a database that have all the roads with all the different signs, for example, and speed limits and so on. So I think this is the first step before dealing with any artificial intelligence development system, because today it's important. We know that this is the future. We know there are ethical aspects to be addressed. But at least in order to be able to have this developed or technology in our countries, we need to have all the data required for this artificial intelligence systems. Otherwise, we will use the data from other countries, and you know very well that it is very complicated as infrastructure are not the same. Of course, we need also to continue our development and do the construction of good infrastructure, but education as well is needed. So I think there is 3 pillars that I need to address from my perspective as a Minister of Transportation and Logistics in my country. Is first digitizations, data construct with the different stakeholders, including the telecom operators, startups, and local governments, authorities, and so on. Continue to build the infrastructure and make these rules much more important while we digitize them. So we need also to work on the education of people. So the mentality. For example, you build a footbridge, but if nobody is taking it, you know that there will be accidents. The people need to be educated to save their lives, and this is very important as well to work them. And I think that the civil society and the education minister will need to work seriously on those issues.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your insights. And to move along now, we have Chet Babler from ARM. Chet, are you there?
I am, Bryn. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you really well. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation. It looks fantastic. So
great, thank you. And a real honor to be representing ARM here today. Do we have the presentation? Brilliant. Okay, if we could go to the next slide, please. So just to introduce ARM, we developed the foundational semiconductor technology that partners will incorporate and put it into their silicon chips. It's a shared success business model that has been actually very successful. So almost 200 billion ARM-based chips have been shipped to date. And we estimate we probably touch 70% of the global population with our technology. As a specific example, 99% of today's world's smartphones feature our technology, and pretty much in your everyday life, professional, personal life, you will interact with electronics that's powered by ARM. The reason we're really interested in this initiative is the fact that 100% of the world's shared data will be processed on ARM technology somewhere, whether it's in the cloud, the edge, or endpoint. But also we're very committed to technology for good, and specifically the sustainable development goals. Next slide, please. And our technology has been deployed into automotive for many years, over 25 years now. So you'll find our partners are shipping silicon chips into the car in all of these different types of domain, body control, powertrain, cockpit, driver assistance, autonomy, and we work with many of the top automotive chip companies in the world. Next slide, please. So three things I'll touch on today are safety in a chip, collaboration, and AI and trust. Next slide, please. And again, please. So in the automotive world, functional safety is so critical, and we're really committed to automotive safety. In automotive, and specifically around electronics safety, the applicable safety standard is ISO 26262. And this defines differing levels of safety integrity level, or ASIL, for different safety use cases. And ARM's role in this, in the semiconductor world around safety, is developing specific semiconductor IP that's got capabilities and features that will help our partners develop safety capable silicon, and their partners to be able to develop safety capable systems. As well as the semiconductor IP, we also make sure software and key documentation that supports that safety story is also available throughout the whole chain. Safety is not a silver bullet. You can't just solve it at one point. We've heard people talking about safety system and safety pillars. So silicon is one element of that safety system that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. Let's talk about collaboration, because we've heard a lot of speakers talking about how can we convince the industry, private players to work together. And it's something that ARM spends a lot of time focusing on. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of trends happening in the automotive industry at the moment. There's a lot of evolving architecture in the electronics. We're seeing consolidation of multiple functions into much more centralized compute. We're seeing automotive makers are starting to explore with cloud-based development, so developing applications in the cloud, deploying them to the vehicle. We're seeing an evolving value chain. One of the other speakers spoke about the value chain and the importance around that. We're seeing new players coming in. We're seeing the supply chain becoming much more complex and distributed. And lastly, we as consumers, our expectations around what vehicles are, what they can deliver for us, what are the features, capabilities we want, are evolving rapidly as well. And when we take some of these macro trends into account, all of this is starting to paint a picture towards a software-defined vehicle trend. And we're seeing this a lot. We're hearing this from our partners as we engage with the ecosystem. And the key thing here is in all of these trends, and you can see I've highlighted it here, safety really is important. It's a key theme that's driving through this. There's a lot of complexity we've got to deal with. And if you click to the next slide, please. And that's why we introduced last month, actually, a new initiative called SOFI. So this is a scalable open architecture for embedded edge. And what we're really trying to do here is to drive an open industry initiative to enable this opportunity around software-defined vehicle. And we'll be developing standardized software architecture, but crucially extending it to having cloud technologies that are aware of functional safety. And I think this is a key thing. It's not just a silicon level problem, it's a software problem, it's a cloud problem. And if we can address all of these together, we can have this future of software-defined vehicle, which will, of course, use artificial intelligence as a key enabler. The other element that we're delivering as part of this open initiative is a reference implementation platform. So we've already made this first reference software stack available free for download. And now what we're doing now is we've convened a special interest group, and we're hoping we can now extend this initiative to bring in more partners and to really start to make some of these key software capabilities applicable and accessible by a much wider audience. Next slide, please. So at the kickoff of this initiative, we were really pleased and honored to have a whole range of stakeholders that were supportive of what we're trying to do. You can see here, it's a mixture of silicon vendors, software vendors, cloud vendors, OEMs, system integrators as well. And this group will be expanding as a special interest group and accelerates. But really the key point here is it's a collaboration of industry. It's not one company trying to solve the problem in their own, or indeed just having a proprietary solution to the challenges that we're seeing around software-defined vehicle and the AI that will be needed to empower it. Next slide, please. And then lastly, AI, ethics and trust. Several speakers have touched on this. Next slide, please. And a key thing to bear in mind here is that AI obviously needs data. A lot of speakers have spoken about the importance of data, access to data, but that data is going to be generated in different places. It could be generated in the cloud, it could be generated at the edge, it could be generated at the endpoint. That data needs to be processed, and it needs to be processed safely and securely. And the other element, of course, is when we say endpoint, of course, we're talking about automotive, but here the pedestrian, the road user will also be generating, processing using data as well. We need to bear in mind these different sources of where data is going to be produced from. And the key thing is, if we're going to use this data, how can we have trust in the data? Next slide, please. So ARM's been thinking about this. In fact, we actually published a trust manifesto around AI recently, as you can see on the top right here. But there's many other countries are looking at this problem around trustworthy ethical AI. And when we've looked at these various proposals that many companies are proposing, we've seen some commonalities here: accountability, privacy, explainability, safety, fairness, security. And these are the key things that we've really taken away looking at all of these different proposals. And from an ARM perspective, we think if we can address these key 6 principles, we'll be well on our way towards trustworthy AI and the data that we can then use for road safety. Next slide, please. So one of the proposals that ARM is considering is, we think the technology sector really should start to come together and develop some kind of chain of assurance that can help us to build trust in AI. And what this really means is all of the key stakeholders in the supply chain, AI supply chain, should look at issuing some kind of statement about what are the trust issues relevant to their piece of technology, their IP, their service that they have considered. And then crucially, what are they doing or what are they going to do to address those issues? And as you see on the diagram on the bottom here, if we can get to this stage of the key people in this chain of AI chain can provide information to the next person in the chain and so on, all the way to the end user, we can create this assurance all the way through the value chain around the data, around AI, and then make sure this technology really can be well deployed, well adopted to get us to some of these goals that we have around road safety. I think that was my last slide. Thank you.
Excellent, Chet. I really appreciate that. It's fascinating to hear you say that 100% of the world's shared data will pass through an ARM device at some point, an ARM-enabled device, and because that kind of means that the data is potentially, if it's passing through your devices, it's all available, but then effectively it gets siloed up into lots of different applications. And how do we sort of create collaboration to make sure that we don't end up with this siloed data, and particularly for road safety, and enable all of the sources to be valuable and useful going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and several speakers have been talking about the challenges around access to data. And I think ultimately we need to do more of this education around the benefits of how collaborating and sharing data for society is good, can be understood by the different, people who are generating or owning the data. We think, governments, public, private, working together is the way to do this. And, ultimately, we're talking about saving lives here, right? So, there has to be a societal understanding and appreciation that this is the right thing to do. And of course, safe vehicles, safer roads are good for society. They're good for business. So, the private sector should have an incentive and a motive to not only do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good business as well. So I think that's why driving collaboration is going to be important, because all of the key stakeholders can mutually benefit.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to Klaus's point right at the beginning about this sort of safety footprint that is really then attached to businesses. So it gives them insights that they may not even have into the safety of their own supply chains and the impact that they can have globally, which I think is fascinating. And I think, Sophie, for me, when I first saw it, it was an incredibly exciting announcement. Obviously, I had a perspective of automated vehicles and software-defined vehicles. But how do you see that as an initiative progressing, and how could the AI for Road Safety initiative help with Sophie? Participate in that, amplify that, and use it not necessarily just in vehicles and waiting for that technology to come, but maybe is there a role for aftermarket for the use of Sophie and systems built around Sophie, because they could proliferate into the market a lot quicker than waiting for the rollout of new vehicles and new vehicle technology. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, a key thing here was, because of the foundational position that ARM has in technology and working with the whole ecosystem, we recognize that there's this huge potential around software defined, but everyone was trying to solve the problem in their own silos. So we wanted to create something that was open, where everyone was welcome. We wanted to make an open source reference stack that people could start looking at these challenges around automotive workloads, around AI safety in automotive, and providing a hardware reference platform. So you don't have to wait for the silicon, for the ECUs, for the modules to come to market. You can start exploring now, looking at what some of those data challenges, what some of those AI challenges are. So, if people are interested, I would urge them to look at the special interest group that's been set up. Please come, please contribute your thoughts, your ideas. Please help us define this architecture that will benefit whole of the automotive industry and not just for one or two players. So that would be my suggestion.
Excellent. All right. Well, we look forward to collaborating with you, Chet, on that, because I think it could have incredible impact, even within that 2030 timescale that we're looking at, and that's essential. So really appreciate your efforts in this regard.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. And then sticking on the sort of vehicle topics, we're very lucky to be joined by Jessica from Towards Zero Foundation and also Global NCAP to provide some insights. And Jessica, I know you're very aware of how long it takes to roll out some of these technologies into the marketplace. So your insights from that would be really interesting for us.
Great. Thanks, Brent. Hi, everyone. Congratulations on this initiative, and it's a pleasure to be able to join you at this launch today. So I'm going to give a bit of my own thinking and insights as to the role of AI in connection to vehicle safety and vehicle safety technologies. And today I've already heard AI being mentioned in the vehicle safety space, especially in relation to autonomous vehicles quite a few times already. And while there's definitely a lot of applications in terms of AI in autonomous vehicles, there are a number of other smart technologies that use AI technologies that are available here and now today that can also play a huge role in being able to help us meet that 50 by 2030 goal. We're very excited about how AI can contribute to vehicle safety and helping to reduce road trauma. And it definitely does have a huge role to play. But the caveat is when they finally become widely available, especially where we're talking about autonomous vehicles, the lead time in actually having it penetrate enough of the fleet for it to be able to make a difference to road trauma, that lead time is a lot longer than what some of us might actually consider. And, it's great that there's so much interest in being able to develop the autonomous vehicle further. And there definitely should be further developments in these areas, but we must not delay the implementation of smart technologies that can make a difference in the here and now in terms of road trauma. There are many smart vehicle safety technologies that are already available today, such as autonomous emergency braking. We heard John and a few others mention electronic stability control, intelligent speed assistant, lane keep assist, and the list goes on. There's a lot of vehicle safety technologies that are smart, that uses AI, that can make a difference right now. And these are some of the technologies that we were hoping would be available 10, 20 years ago. 10, 20 years ago, we were hoping that now we would be able to see some of these smart technologies available in the market, and they are here now. But what we're seeing is that the penetration of these technologies are still relatively low, especially in low and middle income countries, the very regions that bear the highest burden of road trauma. So there is a danger that countries may overlook the existing technologies for what may be coming in the future, looking forward to autonomous vehicles and other, sexier technologies that might become available in the future, and miss that opportunity to save lives at the earliest opportunity, which is right now. So some of the technologies that I've mentioned, they are available right now, and they are also highly effective. There's lots of research to show the effectiveness of these technologies in being able to reduce road trauma. And we need to also keep in mind, these technologies that I've mentioned, these are also the very technologies that are needed in the future fully autonomous vehicles. So we need things like intelligent speed assist to tell the autonomous vehicle what speed they should be traveling in. We need autonomous emergency braking so that the future autonomous vehicle would know when to brake. So these are the technologies that are available now that we should be pushing for, so that the future AV would have an easier time being integrated into the vehicle fleet. So we can save so many lives just through the deployment of what we know right now. And especially in low and middle income countries, the availability we know is not fantastic. Unfortunately, there is a big divide in the availability of vehicle safety and safe technologies in low and middle income countries as compared to high income regions. But we can start to close that gap through the effective deployment of these existing technologies. Many of these technologies that have been mentioned, they can't be retrofitted. So you can't fit a lot of these safety technologies onto the car after they've been manufactured, which means it's very important for us to ensure that these technologies are included at the time when the car is being manufactured. Otherwise, we're going to have to rely on the natural turnover of the fleet, which could potentially take decades. In some regions, we know it would take almost 3 decades for the fleet to be able to completely turn over. So it's a very, very long lead time. So some of the most effective ways to ensure that cars are equipped with these safety technologies is through regulation, making sure that governments actually regulate for these technologies, and also increasing consumer demand for these technologies and manufacturers making them a standard via new car assessment programs. So at Global NCAP, we've been promoting many of these technologies through our Stop the Crash project, especially in low and middle income countries. We promote AEB, motorcycle ABS, and electronic stability control. And, we're encouraging countries in the low and middle income regions to mandate these technologies. So once again, these technologies are not new. They've been around for quite a number of years now, but we know they're effective. And just through deployment of these technologies in the low middle income countries, we can actually help countries meet their 50 by 30 targets. And then on the other hand, new car assessment programs have also been pushing manufacturers to increase vehicle safety in low middle income regions. And they include points in their protocols to encourage manufacturers to make a lot of these smart technologies as standard, so that consumers everywhere in the world can reap the safety benefits. There has been research that has shown that from the time of regulation, it will take roughly 30 years for the technology to be able to penetrate 95% of the fleet. So given that we don't actually have fully autonomous vehicles yet, and they're not regulated for, so the chances of autonomous vehicles really making a significant difference in helping us meet that 2030 target is quite minimal. And it will take a much longer time than we realize, unless we make a concerted effort to accelerate its development. even with the existing technologies, it will still take time for it to filter through the fleet. And that's why when we talk about vehicle safety and the technologies that we're pushing for, there really is no time to delay. We need to regulate right now. We need manufacturers to make these technologies available as standard right now, because it takes time. So we need to really focus a lot of our energy on what's available now so that it can actually help make a difference in 2030 and beyond. So I guess the message is we're very excited to see where the AI developments are going to take us in the vehicle safety space. But in the meantime, let's not forget to implement the technologies that are available here and right now. Thanks, Bryn.
That's amazing, Jessica. I really appreciate that, and it's some fascinating insights. I think that the timescales is the thing that concerns me the most. You know, I've worked in the autonomous vehicle industry for the last 5-6 years. And that you have to recognize the impact by 2030 will be minimal. So it's really, you know, this initiative is our opportunity to say, okay, we've had the investment, we have some of these new technologies, how can we harness them quickly, more quickly, you know, and what areas should we explore? So we'll have some fascinating talks coming up about post-crash response, which looks like a very interesting area that could have immediate impact, regardless of the technology that's inside the vehicle. So yeah, really appreciate your insights today, Jessica. It's been great.
You're welcome.
Super. And you mentioned regulation. So it will be interesting now. We have Francois Guichard from the UNECE. Francois is involved in WP29, WP1, and UNECE activities around transportation. Very knowledgeable in the area. So it's a pleasure to have Francois with us today. Francois, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bryn. We prepared a short presentation. We have 5 minutes, so I will provide you with a short update about our activities on automated and connected vehicles at UNECE. Next. So as you know, and you heard Olga before, so we are a UN agency, part of the UN Secretariat, and we are one of the 5 regional economic commissions of the UN under ECOSOC. But we are also custodian of 59 conventions for inland transport, and we have activities that are essential for road safety and which are global, for example, on vehicles and on traffic rules. Next. So in order to develop technical regulations and rules, we have multilateral agreements, and I want to mention, for example, the importance of the 1949 Geneva Convention on road traffic and road signs, as well as the 1968 Vienna Convention on road traffic and road signs and signals. And we are using actually these frameworks in order to define the legal aspects of the use of automated vehicles in traffic. So this will be very important. Next. And we have also 2 other frameworks under which we develop technical regulations for the automotive sector. And when Jessica was speaking about technical regulations, she probably meant also some of these regulations that we developed under these 2 frameworks. And you see that we are developing regulations with many countries around the world, but you see also that some regions are not so much relying on regulations. And this is probably the explanation why some technologies are not really well developed or not really present on these markets, and you see that clearly here on these maps. Next. But today we speak about AI for road safety, so I prepared a short slide to tell you what we are currently addressing at the intergovernmental level. We are addressing AI in the context of vehicle regulations, and there we don't only focus on AI for automated vehicles, we also address AI for many other technologies, active safety, ADAS, etc. We focus also on cybersecurity and software updates because this is also very important. Also in this context, AI for road safety, this is a guarantee for data protection. So we really need to work on this aspect, and this is what we do also at WP29. Of course, when we speak about safety, we develop principles for the safety of automated driving systems, ADAS and active safety. And for that, we have a group dealing with a validation method for automated driving, including the in-use case. And we have also a group dealing with data, event data recorder, as well as data storage systems for automated driving. So we cover also aspects which are very important for the collection of data out of vehicles. And we also discuss in-vehicle access data. And this is quite important because one thing is to collect data on board of vehicle, and another thing is really to get some benefits out of this data. And in-vehicle data access is essential. And of course, as I mentioned with the Vienna Convention, for example, we are working on the rules for the use of these automated vehicles. Next. The stakeholders that we have at UNECE, we are basically hosting big meetings with experts. We have around 60 experts from member states that are regularly attending our sessions. And we rely, of course, on the expertise from the vehicle manufacturers, the suppliers, the road and public transport federations, academia, standard developing organizations, the consumers representatives, including the NCAPs, and of course the motorists. So we have a big group of experts helping us to develop technical regulations. Next. So I said big groups, big numbers. So just to give you an idea of what we do and with whom we do that, we have around 120 to 200 persons, participants in our sessions. And per year, if we add all these participants, we reach 4,000 experts. We have almost 1 meeting per day on automatically connected vehicles. And we have around 50 working groups in total, formal and informal, which are dealing with vehicle safety and the performance of vehicles, including the environmental aspects. So you see, we have a big network, and we have the possibility to use this network also for the sake of AI for road safety. Next. I'd like to use the 1 or 2 minutes we have now to promote some ideas, just ideas, for the partnership. Seen from my desk, I believe, the telecommunication aspect is essential, and there we need to think about cybersecurity and data protection even more than we do today. We need to address some challenges also related to coverage, latency, and interference. This is very important for connected vehicles. And I'd like to mention absolutely fantastic results that we observe on the market without the impact of regulation. We see some mobile phone producers thinking about driving. So maybe about this feature called Do Not Disturb While Driving. And we also heard in September about the fantastic advancement in the technology, the possibility to detect when a biker is falling from his bike and to respond and to make some progress also in the post-crash response. So these are things I believe that the AI for road safety could embrace, and maybe we could promote these activities and see how they can also produce some results in terms of road safety. Next. So this was my last slide, Rin. I hope it was not too quick. If you have any question, please go ahead.
Perfect. No, that's really, really good, Francois. Thank you for a very short overview of an incredible body of work that you have going on inside the UNECE. So it's incredibly encouraging to see. So thanks for your contribution today. I think we'll move on. We have Erez from Mobileye. Erez, if you're there, thank you for joining us. So Mobileye obviously do some fascinating work, and Erez is here to share that, and it extends all the way from autonomy down to aftermarket. So really interesting span of technologies. Erez, over to you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. So thanks to Jessica's talk. I think the ground is set for many of the concepts I'm here to share. I think the key message I want to deliver is that there is a lot of potential we can unleash from existing AI already deployed for perception in real-time AI on the vehicles, but it requires some more encouragement, and beyond the encouragement, something that concerns decision-making, monitoring, and regulation, which I'll talk about. So if you can go to the first slide. Mobileye's business spans between 3 main business pillars. We are in driver assistance systems based on computer vision, front camera primarily, but also surround cameras and other sensors. We also have a business pillar around crowdsourced high definition mapping, which is called REM, in which we are leveraging the high volume of vehicles equipped with cameras with AI on the edge to harvest very effective small chunks of information to build high definition maps of the environment. And we are in the business, of course, of autonomous driving. The impact of the company as far as road safety and the technology of AI and computer vision is easily sensible, and we're expecting to cross 100 million of these cameras on the road by the end of this year. I think that speaks for itself. These cameras, if we can move to the next one, please. So vision-based AI can provide a backbone for road safety. And I'm talking still, unlike many of the other talks, thanks for the great talks, but unlike many of the talks that talk about AI for offline processing of data that was aggregated, now we're talking about real-time AI on the edge and how it can contribute. Computer vision, of course, all of us are human drivers with eyes. We don't have radars or lidars or anything else, and that suffices. So the visual stream is a comprehensive stream of information to allow us to drive a vehicle and definitely to amplify the safety of driving. When we talk about environment modeling, we are talking about 4 elements that comprise the environment: road users, road geometry, road boundaries, and road semantics. Being able to extract all 4 of these from the visual stream makes it a comprehensive perception modality. Now, these perception capabilities are harnessed for our advanced driver assistance, as well as our mapping, as well as autonomous driving. But when we say advanced driver assistance, I would want to disambiguate 2 clusters of applications here: safety versus comfort. Driver assistance, such as a highway traffic jam, navigator pilot, ACC, are comfort functions, and safety actions are usually emergency responses, lane keep assist, AEB, etc., etc. Our position is very clear that Vision Zero can be realized ahead of autonomous driving, well ahead of autonomous driving, and can be achieved by correctly harnessing safety ADAS today. Now, when I'm saying harnessing safety ADAS devices today, one of the tools is to, of course, promote and incentivize the proliferation of these devices. I think there is great work done by the NCAP bodies and by the regulators, to the GSR as an example, to make that a reality. But given that we have a perception device, there's much more to do, and that does require some regulatory oversight on how to extract the maximum value of these perception capabilities to maximize the advancement towards the Vision Zero ideal. Next, please. This is just a quick snapshots, quick videos. I won't be talking too much about them, but the advances of computer vision and AI in harnessing cameras as a comprehensive perception modality, we had a huge leap forward in the last 5 years or so. Now we can definitely demonstrate cases where the perception is in cases exceeding that of humans. The perception capability is achievable by deep networks over cameras. Also, the devices, the imagers themselves, and the light sensitivities, high definition, high dynamic range capabilities, and the resolution brings us closer to that superhuman perception capabilities. Now, when it comes to increasing the road safety using these capabilities, if we can move to the next slide, please. We have the problem of decision making, and that comes from our leg in the autonomous driving world, where we wanted to come to a provably safe decision making of the vehicle, given the perception of the environment. Now, the point here, and this is as AI experts and AI, in many cases, commercial evangelists, we see some limitation to AI there. And we want to be very clear on this AI on the edge in real time. Safety for decision-making cannot be trained. That's not the tool for it. You cannot learn black swans, okay? What we definitely can do with this very strong perception is have very expressive driving policies and very smart strategies and tactics of driving the vehicle. But when it comes to the safety of the vehicle, we need, and that's probably the single most important regulatory step that needs to take place, both in the world of autonomous driving, but also in promoting road safety using driver assistance, is to take that elusive social contract of what is the duty of care of each road agent. What is the duty of care? How much distance should I keep away from the vehicle ahead of me? How much distance should I leave to the vehicle in the next lane when I want to cut into its lane? How quickly or how fast can I drive by an occlusion where a pedestrian can pop out of, or another vehicle? Enforcing that you're giving way, you're not taking the rule, the way, the priority, and many other of these not many others, but several other of these principles can now, given that we have a quantifiable model of the environment, a quantitative model of the environment, which the vehicle is aware of, this elusive contract of the duty of care can help us resolve the real problem, the negotiation scenarios between road users. And the model that we are proposing, the RSS, is again very similar to many other of the talks that were given here. We look at safety not as a proprietary business asset. We look at it as it's important to have it open and transparent and broadly embraced. This concept that formalizes and quantifies what is the duty of care of the road user, of the vehicle in this case, is a crucial step. And we have our autonomous driving projects have defined the contract and are complying with that contract. Again, a model-based contract, not an AI contract. And there's a huge body of work behind that contract. And we are now also standardizing it in the IEEE. I invite all of you to get a deeper look through that. And maybe I'll just conclude with the last bit when it comes to the mapping and the role of AI there. Next, please. Next slide, please. That, as I said, we're harvesting data from the cameras and are able to build very detailed maps, high-definition maps of the world, supporting both safety and comfort driver assistance, of course, autonomous driving as well. And as far as the contribution for safety, you can think about these maps as robustifying our understanding of the road geometry and road semantics, which in these critical negotiation scenarios gives the full visibility of what the full set of inputs as to what is the duty of care of the host vehicle at this point. So I'll conclude here, and I'll be very glad to.
Excellent. Many thanks, Erez. Really appreciate your contribution today. I think one of the things that you announced recently was a partnership with Mahindra working in India. I just want to, if you could just share your insights, because I understand a lot of the work that you do is it needs cultural adaptation effectively to the road users in that market. So what are the things that you're finding? What are the things that you're looking to find as you move into the Indian market? So
before the road road users culture, as you call it, there is also the perception and the sampling of data, which faithfully represent its frequency in this market. So very strange loads on small rickshaws is one example. The appearances of these road users, pedestrians carrying huge loads on them as well. and all sorts of making sure that the data for the perception in real time is well representative of these. But of course, having multiple, also a different cultural difference as to the rules of engagement, call it on the road, and the negotiation practices on the road can also be modeled with these parameters, with the parameters of this model that I just mentioned, the RSS.
Excellent. And then obviously, there's another side of the business which you didn't touch on, but is the aftermarket side. And I'm really interested to know how you see that progressing and whether there are any short-term opportunities to look at aftermarket solutions in low and middle income countries to avoid that long time delay between penetration into the vehicle fleet that Jessica mentioned earlier.
Correct. So Jessica was correct also in her comment that retrofitting an active driver assistance system is not a trivial thing. When it comes to homologating a vehicle today, it is homologated without such type of intervention. For example, braking the vehicle based on an aftermarket device. So if something could unleash this kind of a progress, a huge step forward, is attending to these homologation criteria and homologation restrictions as far as controlling the vehicle, or intervening in the vehicle control post factum.
And then but your current solutions don't look at intervention, they just look at warning of human drivers, like advanced collision avoidance warning and measures like that.
Correct. That's what they are capable of doing. And also these devices are part of these harvesters that I mentioned, can help harvest information which is informative as to the road safety.
Excellent. So going back to Tony's point about making sure bus drivers in India and looking at them, there could be a role for aftermarket in those existing bus fleets, for example.
Most certainly, for enforcement and for oversight.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. I really appreciate that. It's fantastic to have Mobileye involved in this launch today. So thanks very much. We look forward to collaborating with you in the future. It
was my pleasure.
Super. Thank you very much. So I think we have a second poll. I think it might be time to just run a second poll, just so we've had some information shared with us already from all of the interesting speakers before. And then we have another poll that we'll be able to run. While the poll's being set up, just to give you a little preview, after the poll, we'll come to David and Philip, who will be talking about a vulnerable road user case study that was done in the UK. Okay, so the poll's available, so I'll let you all focus on the poll. So what type of challenges do you recommend the AI for Road Safety initiative should launch? What areas after this event, in terms of what Jean-Todd said at the beginning, which areas do you think we should focus on for the next, to have an impact during the next decade of action? So AI for mobile phones, AI combined with vehicles, AI combined with smart infrastructure, AI for post-crash response would be the other one. Again, I can't vote, unfortunately. I have my own views. I shan't skew you though before we get the results. We'll leave that up for a few moments. Excellent. So again, interesting that we're focusing back on vehicles again. So that was similar in the first poll. I'm just going to take a capture of that. I agree. It's fascinating to look at vehicles. The main challenge that we have in the 2030 agenda is actually penetrating that fleet. Going back to Jessica's point, how do we get these technologies into those vehicles and get them in there fast enough? So that's definitely the area that we need to explore a little more. So thanks very much for that. So without further ado, we'll move on to David and Philip. David from Rossborough and Philip from CSense, just to give us a case study.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Bryn, and thank you, Excellencies, colleagues and friends for having us today. I think we've got a couple of slides to share with you. of our experiences of a live project in Birmingham in the UK, and the Brum in the Cycle Smart Brum is the local name for Birmingham, and it does reference cars, as Birmingham is a very car-centric city. So I'm David Walker. I lead the road safety and drowning prevention programs for ROSPA, which is the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. We're a UK-based charity with a vision of life free from serious injury. And we work with government, private and public sector to realise this goal of life free from serious injury, both in the UK and abroad. I think our presentation is slightly different, that we're focusing on a vulnerable group, and we're focusing on a project and a technology which is in situ now and is scaling as we speak. And it's a really promising project, and I'll leave Philip to introduce himself, but Philip's the CEO and co-founder of C-Sense and has been a partner with us on this project, along with the Department for Transport for the last couple of years. The project is based on AI-derived insights, and it looks at both safety and provision for the cyclists. So we're looking at the quality of experience as well as the actual harm that cyclists face. Next slide, please. So the challenge in the UK, and particularly in Birmingham as the second city in the country, but a very atypical city from a larger scale UK city, is that it's very high car dependency. There's lots of fast roads through the city centre, and there's lots of use around cars. And Birmingham has a car culture, and it is transforming over the years, particularly over the last 3 to 4 years. That agenda is really transforming. But what we don't have is a long-standing infrastructure that you see in some European countries. We don't necessarily have the tens and thousands of miles of protected bike lanes. We do very much have cyclists intermingling with pedestrians and traffic. So there's a challenge there. And more generally across the UK, we have a government that is very keen on cycling. We have a Prime Minister who is a very keen cyclist, and we have an agenda that delivering towards larger and broader decarbonisation goals. But effectively, we have a goal where we want to see half of all journeys in towns and cities being cycled and walked. Now, there are a couple of barriers to that, and both of those turns in terms of harm and actually perception. When you look at the attitudinal surveys and the actual propensity to cycle surveys, 2 out of 3 of every adult who may want to cycle does not feel safe to cycle, and that's a common feeling. And then their most common indicators for that, most common indicators to encourage cycling are safer roads, safer cycle lanes, and safer segregated cycle paths. And a bit like Jessica said before about the penetration of these measures, they take time. Birmingham is installing these sorts of measures, as are other cities from down the country, but they take time. And like other speakers, we're seeing harm today. In the UK, we have about 1,500 road-related traffic deaths, of which 10% of those are cyclists, and then there's many multiples of those that are killed and seriously injured, leading to life-changing injury. And the practice and the intervention has really been about the after the fact, that we see the harm, we observe the harm, we do some design and engineering observation, some risk assessment process, and then possibly we make some interventions which makes the infrastructure safer. And we tell cyclists, generally tell cyclists to be safer, wear a helmet, wear high vis, do all these sorts of things that we know actually quite possibly erode cyclists' desire to ride. So all of that has a direct or an obtuse conflict with getting people out of their cars and getting them onto active travel, which is what we need to do as a country. So as Klaus talked about before, our rate of reduction, both rate and actual number of harm, has reduced over the years. Historically, we've had a really good story to say about road safety, whereas that's actually plateaued now. So one of the things that we looked at, and one of the range of projects, particularly this one with Philip, is to try and find a different way to look at a city and to try and find a different way into that harm, and particularly to start to find some leading indicators, some near time indicators and harm, and not just wait for the traditional Stats 19 report, which is police-derived government data with good location, but very, very slow and can be months and maybe a year before you can start to access it. But actually, can we start to see that closer to near time, or actually eventually in some kind of real-time authorized space? So I'm going to leave Philip to talk through the detail and the application of the project that we've looked at here, but want to just leave you with a key point before Philip does that. This is a project that is operating today at city scale and is generating hundreds of millions of data points of insight. So we're already starting to gather that, and we're already starting to use that with policymakers and the cyclists to improve the lived experience and what we should be doing for provision for the city. So I'm going to pass over to Philip to talk through the actual technology and what we did by way of intervention in Birmingham.
Thank you, David. So in order to crowdsource lots of data and to do that in a low cost and scalable way, we deployed 200 C-Sense ACE lights to cyclists around the city. Now, they look like regular bike lights, but they're crammed with patented communications and sensor technology. Specifically, we're taking around 800 sensor readings every single second from the cycle journey. Now, without artificial intelligence, it would be very difficult to make use of that data. It's very complicated data, it requires a lot of filtering. And so we use bare metal AI at the edge in order to better process and understand that data. It allows us to do things like profile the bicycle and the cyclist. So if you imagine someone cycling around on a road bike with skinny tires and high inflation pressures, the data that we collect from that will look very different from someone on a mountain bike with large tires and low inflation pressures. And so we're able to compensate for all of that in order to standardize the data. Similarly, we can look at the experience of the cyclist. So we can see, a beginner cyclist will typically react to his or her environment as they come upon it and be very abrupt with their inputs and not really think and anticipate further ahead. Whereas the more experienced cyclist will look further ahead and anticipate more and have less inputs into the bike. So by understanding the type of cyclist and the type of bicycle that they're on, we can standardize the data. We can understand what constitutes a near miss, a swerve event, a brake event, and so on, so we can get much better and richer data insights. Next slide, please. And this combination of sensors and AI really gives us a level of clarity that just isn't available to be collected any other way. It's not only better insights, but of course they're standardized as well. So we can compare across different cycling groups, across genders, and indeed across cities and geographies as well. Next slide, please. And the AI isn't just working for the city, it's working for the cyclist as well. So as the cyclist is cycling around, the AI is profiling a lot of what's happening in the environment around the cyclist. So it's got an awareness of when the cyclist is at a road junction, a roundabout, filtering in traffic, if they take emergency avoiding action around a pothole or other obstruction in the road, then it's able to understand and determine that the cyclist may be at a higher risk level. And when it detects that, it will react by flashing brighter and faster to help keep the cyclist more visible at these critical times. Next slide, please. So we collected over the space of just a few months, nearly 800 million data points, which is a lot of data to analyze. But actually AI really helped us there because it essentially had pre-scrubbed the data for us, removing the outliers, standardizing the data. So all we really had to do was just to ensure that we had multiple cyclists, bikes and journeys, really to avoid any bias in the data set. Next slide, please. And the results were really quite stark. So we find that cyclists are 2.4 times more likely to brake or swerve in a very urgent kind of a way when they're in proximity to one of the Stats 19 known collision locations. And that kind of indicates to us a couple of things. First of all, we're able to detect that these areas are potentially higher risk than other areas, so something's going on. And second of all, the risk is still present in the environment, that whatever the underlying risks or issues that are causing these conflicts to occur are still present. And I'll hand you back to David.
Thanks, Philip. So, as you can see, the data set and the methodology and the underpinning technology of AI gave us the ability to see the city in a new way and to see the associations with both the riders' individual lived experience and the actual harm that they encountered on a daily basis. I apologize for the static map. We do have some better graphics, but we thought we'd go safe on the presentation. But again, what you can see in one of the core areas of the study zone is the red dots are showing some brake and swerve indicators, and the black dots are showing the historic harm indicators. And there was association with those historic harm indicators, but there's also some new insight which we've been detailing into. So there are some obvious things in the city. The city has an old canal with very cobbled and wet and slippery surfaces, which is obvious when you start to look at that. But there are lots of locations where both our assessors and the city's own road traffic assessors would look at that and say, well, there clearly is harm happening there. We're observing that, but actually we're not quite clear why that's happening. And that's really insightful for us in terms of seeing that within days or weeks of that enough volume of riders to report that, but seeing that really very quickly in near time and not waiting for a collision to happen or waiting for 18 months or so for the data to be published. So again, it's a really, really useful tool that we've been working with policymakers to play back some of the challenges and not just say, well, actually, we need a certain amount of cyclists to be in a city, or we need to see a certain amount of harm to happen. It's more to catch the lived experience of what is happening and what we could do to intervene, which is the next phase of the project. Next slide, please. So I think in recap, the key points to take home are that the AI enabled a personalized view of risk to cyclists, so not just this arbitrary number. As Philip said, it scrubbed and cleaned and processed that. The platform successfully identified known hazardous locations and found some new hazardous locations for us to look into. And we can see and are working towards publication for that, but we can see that the approach is scalable and offers benefits both to the consumer and the wider community. So we can start to think about that consumer and how we market and train them or help them, but equally how will they put them in a safe space and actually start to make that riding journey more enjoyable, which is what we need as cities in the UK and wider across the world. And that's us. Thank you, Brim.
Excellent. Thank you both. I really appreciate that. And I think it's probably the first study that I've seen that's kind of captured data from vulnerable road users in order to provide leading metrics around road safety. So I think we'd be fascinated to look at how we could take that forward and then deploy that in low and middle income countries where obviously two-wheel, whether it's motorbikes or cycling, is a lot more prevalent. So yeah, really appreciate your insights and we look forward to following up with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brim.
Excellent. I believe we have a question that we're going to ask the audience for responses for just in the open chat, and it's been a theme that's kind of run throughout. But which road safety challenges do you think could be solved by smartphone apps? Is one of the questions. So it's an open question. It's not a poll, but if you have any ideas or thoughts around what the road safety challenges could be solved by smartphone apps, please feel free to post them in the chat and then we'll collate all of those views afterwards. Perfect. So now I'd really like to introduce Rob from IRAP. Rob's work is fascinating. Rob's actually in Australia, so he's up the latest, I think, of all of us. So Rob, really appreciate you being here. Look forward to sharing your insights, and also that link going back to Mobileye talking about mapping and how you see that evolving in the future. So over to you, Rob.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Bryn, and hopefully I won't turn into a pumpkin at midnight. So this should all go well. But look, very excited to talk to you about our AI RAP initiative that is looking to scale the data needed to actually inform road infrastructure related decisions, both for consumers, but all of those applications that we've been talking about today that can help vehicles, road users and others. Next slide, please.
Some very quick background on IRAP is we're a charity and we're working in more than 100 countries around the world. And that's in partnership with development banks, national governments, research agencies, industry, research bodies, and non-government associations as well. And we've assessed already more than 2.5 million kilometres of road in a much more manual way. And that's helped guide over $80 billion worth of investment in safer road infrastructure worldwide. Next slide, please. But we need to be able to do that better. And you can see here that at the core of what we deliver worldwide is already harmonized. You can see a lot of the discussion today is about the need for harmonized data. When it comes to infrastructure, we already have that harmonized global star rating standard that's been applied in those 100 countries worldwide. So whether it's in Portugal, Mexico, Florida, Bangladesh, South Africa, or in Bogota, the data is collected in the identical way, and the star ratings are actually reflected for each of those different locations. But also importantly, and picking up on the last presentation from David and Philip, is all the different road user groups. So we have a pedestrian star rating, a cyclist star rating, a motorcyclist star rating, and vehicle occupants as well, including public transport. Next, please. And so the advantage of that is that we already have this harmonized global standard that the UN member states have actually recognized and have adopted as part of the global road safety performance targets. And that is target 3, to make sure that all new roads are built to at least a 3-star or better standard, 1 star being the least safe, 5-star being the safest. And by 2030, to make sure that 75% of travel for each of those road user groups is at that equivalent 3-star or better standard. And you can see the chart in the bottom right there from the OECD report that actually sort of highlights that we can essentially halve the level of death and injury on a road with each incremental improvement in star rating. Hence, the opportunity of reaching 3-star or better worldwide by 2030. Next. So the opportunity that we've been exploring with the AI RAP initiative is, can we star rate every road on Earth every year? And then ultimately live into the dashboards of the autonomous vehicles, as Jessica and Eris have been talking about, is can we get this live star ratings being able to influence decision making? And so to do that, we're taking advantage of the AI RAP data marketplace that we've been working on for approximately 5 years now. And if I can go to the next part of the slide, and really what we're talking about, and as was covered by Jean and others, Mr. Zhao earlier on, is that there is a chance that a lot of this data, if we can go, sorry, just back to the previous slide, is that a lot of this data can become available for the public good, for the public sector, like the US government, European Union as part of the RISM directive, Brazil and Indian governments, the private sector, so the fleet operators, FedEx, the vehicle manufacturers, the OEMs and the new vehicle fleets, toll road operators, fleets and other companies who are actually really and can benefit from this infrastructure data, again, collected to the same global harmonized standard. And what's fantastic and what we've found throughout our efforts so far is that to do that, we will need to bring in data from a whole range of different places. Some might be from Google, some from TomTom, some from the Mobileye data, or we'll be looking at it being analysed by teams from Anditi or Red Optima, or using telematics data from AT&T. So all of this can come from a variety of sources, but it will all channel through the AI RAP data marketplace to make sure all of those users have the confidence that the data has been collected to the same harmonized standard. That definition of a footpath is identical, whether it's in India or in Israel or Italy. That definition of a safe roadside is the same, whether it's in Bogota or whether it's in Brisbane in Australia, where I'm based. Next slide, please. And so we're already making some great progress, and I say thank you to TomTom here for the work that they're doing with us to be able to immediately generate, as part of their products, where is 75% of travel to support the UN target 4. So in the Australian example, where we have 440,000 kilometres of road in the whole country, 75% of travel happens on just 6.9% of that network, only 30,000 kilometres. So can Australia upgrade 3,000 kilometres of road a year to hit the UN target by 2030? Absolutely. Can every country do that? Yes, they can. And the TomTom 75% of travel data and similar data for pedestrians and others from telematics devices will allow this to happen. Next slide, please. So we're working worldwide on this initiative, and with Foundation Botna, for example, in India, we're looking at satellite data and telematics data to identify high-risk schools across the whole country to apply star rating for schools in a more detailed way to help kids get to school in a 5-star way. We've got a trial for vulnerable road users about to start in the US with ASHTO and TRB. We've been doing the great work in Europe with the European Commission as part of the SLAME project and the Roads That Cars Can Read work. Here in Australia, there's some fantastic work using TomTom LiDAR and Anditi technology to be able to auto-code all of the IRAP attributes as you move along the road and basically start to auto-generate star ratings as you drive, this live star ratings into the cabin and dashboard of the vehicles of the future. And likewise, we're doing this work with the World Bank in Ethiopia and Kenya to see how it works in low data environments, and with the Inter-American Development Bank in Brazil. So we do want to make sure, as Mr. Zhao said at the start, that we can reach everyone everywhere with this initiative. Next slide, please. And so for all of you, I'd encourage, if you would like to hear from the best of the best working with IRAP around the world, we're hosting an event with the Regional Road Safety Observatories on tomorrow and the following Thursday, October 7th and 14th. It's a free event. Google IRAP Innovation Workshop and you will find the details. And we'd love to have you there to hear more about this work in the road infrastructure space and how we see AIRAP can help halve road deaths and injuries by 2030. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Rob. It was definitely worth waiting for. So thanks very much for participating today. And I think it's really interesting to start looking at that again. Going back to Chet's point, the sort of collaboration around data. You know, that these data sources do exist. It's now a question of making sure we can access those for a particular road safety purpose. And it's great to see the public-private partnerships that you're facilitating in order to make that happen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Thank you very much. So for those monitoring the time, I've done a terrible job of moderating, or our speakers have done an incredible job of making it engaging, because we just run out of time. But if you don't mind, we'll continue. I think we're running about 15 minutes behind. But our next speaker will be Melanie from UNICEF. If Melanie is available, perfect. There you are. So from one part of the world to the other. So literally.
Yeah,
Welcome,
thank
Melanie.
you. Thank you so much for having me at this event. So today I'm going to be speaking a little bit about UNICEF's work on AI for children. We have a 2-year initiative that seeks to understand how AI systems and policies can enable the realization of child rights for all children. And to help respond to this question, we conducted a literature review of national AI strategies and discovered that overall there were very few mentions of children or their needs. Despite the fact that we know that children require special protection and that they have unique and distinct rights. And as I'm sure you know, research shows us how children are being impacted by AI technologies, both in positive and adverse ways, and that these technologies will continue to have a profound effect on children's lives now and in the future. And so with the support of the government of Finland and our partners, including the IEEE, the Berkman Klein Center, and the World Economic Forum, among others, we developed a draft policy guidance on AI for children, which we launched last September with the aim to raise awareness of children's rights and also to provide recommendations for the development of child-centered AI, and primarily for governments and businesses. And to inform the development of the guidance, we actually held regional consultations with 200 digital and children's rights experts, as well as consultations with nearly 250 adolescents from around the world, from Brazil to Chile to South Africa. And we also solicited input from a public consultation that we held late last year and a piloting process, which is ongoing with a diverse set of organizations that tested the guidance and provided their feedback through a series of case studies, which are being published on a rolling basis. Next slide, please. So in order to make sure that AI systems and policies are being developed in an ethical and safe way, we formulated the following requirements for child-centered AI, which are based on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And I think if you just click once more, you'll see the list of requirements. And so these high-level requirements and their related recommendations can be adapted to fit different contexts and to suit the needs of stakeholders that are at various levels of AI adoption or maturity. And it really applies to existing technologies, but also to systems that are in the early stages of development or planning. And in the context of AI for road safety, I wanted just to highlight a couple of our requirements from the guidance, just using a broad example of autonomous vehicles. So the first is around inclusion of and for children. So one of our recommendations under this requirement is to adopt an inclusive design approach when developing AI products that will be used by children or impact them. And this inclusion by design approach can help minimize bias and discrimination, particularly if a broad range of stakeholders are included in design teams. So for instance, this could include child psychologists or child rights experts, and where appropriate, even children themselves. And thinking about the current and future developments in the automotive industry, autonomous vehicles, for example, raise safety concerns and questions about child passengers. However, involving child safety advocates during the development phase could help mitigate or reduce future risks to children. And another example that I have is related to prioritizing fairness and non-discrimination for children. So one of our recommendations under this requirement is to develop data sets that include a diversity of children's data. And this includes data equity and representation of children for a particular AI system, including children from different regions, ages, socioeconomic conditions, and ethnicities. And in the case of self-driving software, diverse and representative data sets are necessary to detect and classify objects and to recognize humans, including children, and to be able to respond to various situations, including unfamiliar scenarios. And lastly, to support the implementation of these requirements, we developed two practical tools. One is a roadmap for policymakers, and the other is a development canvas for AI software teams, which raises some key questions, including what data is used and how is it collected, managed, and protected, what mechanisms for child safety are in place, and what are the mechanisms for accountability and redress. Next slide, please. So here you can see a full list of our 9 recommendations and requirements. Next slide. So to close, if you would like to learn more about our project, we highly encourage you to sign up for our mailing list. You can also reach out to us if you have any questions. And you can visit our project website to view our publications, including the draft policy guidance, which we are actually in the process of updating. And we're going to be releasing as version 2.0 in November. And the launch of this updated guidance will take place during our virtual global forum on AI for children, which, as you can see, will be held November 30th and December 1st. And so if you're interested in attending, if you'd like to find out more details, you can go to our website for that as well. And thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your intervention today, Melanie. I think that the fact that young adults, 5 to 29, the leading cause of death is actually road traffic fatalities around the world, means that engaging with UNICEF on this topic is really important. So lower middle income countries and children in those lower middle income countries is really the focus that we have, you know, for the 2030 agenda. So we look forward to collaborating with UNICEF on the initiative going forward.
Likewise, thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. And now I have a really interesting speaker from Flare. It's Caitlin, if you're there. And we're sort of moving into now then on the post-crash care side. And Caitlin, I don't know if you've noticed, it's not getting a lot of love at the moment in terms of the ratings. And so this is your opportunity to turn that around and really explain the challenges that we have with post-crash care and the benefits that could be delivered from it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brennan. Thank you everyone for inviting me. And I'm excited to hopefully convince you why post-crash care is actually a critical part to reducing mortality. So I'm Caitlin Dolkart. I am based in Nairobi, Kenya, and I am the managing director of Flare. At Flare, we aim to ensure that no matter where you are and who you are, that you have access to emergency services. Next slide, please. So I want you to take a moment because you may be sitting in a country, whether it be in London, Australia, the US, where 911 exists, or 999 or 112. And so think for a moment, what would you do if you had an emergency? If you were in a car accident, you know, who would be the first person you'd call? Or what, you know, smart technology like OnStar would immediately call as 911? But that's not the reality, is that nearly 2/3 of the world lack a functioning 911 system. That's about 5 billion people. And so that means that in a single country like Kenya, where we started, there's literally thousands of numbers to call upon. It meant that the average wait time to get an ambulance was about 3 hours. And it meant that less than 1% of road accident victims ever received care before getting to the hospital. So unsurprisingly, we have, you know, one of the highest rates of mortality from road accidents because of the lack of emergency response. Next slide, please. So here's a map of the world. Again, majority of the world doesn't have 911. You can see Africa, where we operate, in Kenya, more than 95% of the continent lacks a functioning 911. And so that means that when you do need emergency help, there really is no single number to call upon. Next slide, please. So who we are is that, you know, a few years back, what we did is we identified that there's a massive opportunity, and this is across the health system. I mean, more than half of our cases are due to road accidents, so it is disproportionately the #1 reason that someone calls us for help. But we deal with every emergency, from heart attack to stroke to COVID, but road accidents predominate the emergencies that we receive. And so we've built kind of an end-to-end solution, because you may be asking yourself, well, why does 57% of the world not have a 911? The reason is simple, is the infrastructure to set up 911 or 999 costs billions of dollars. And so when we're talking about emerging markets or places like Kenya that don't have that type of capital to expend, it can be a very cumbersome and prohibitive system to set up. And so what we did is we built a lightweight, fully digital, cloud-based system that can be set up in a matter of weeks and cost just a fraction of what traditional 911 systems cost. Next slide, please. So today we have over 1,000 first responders on our platform in Kenya. We are the largest provider of emergency services in Kenya and in East Africa. And just this last year, we saved over 5,000 people from road accidents in Kenya. Next slide. We have response times as fast as 2 minutes. We brag about this. We are just as fast as the London ambulance system or the Chicago ambulance system, where I grew up originally from, and our average is 15 minutes. And this is not just in Nairobi. This is on every stretch of the road. This is in, you know, Western Kenya. This is on the coast in Kenya. This is in Northern Kenya. And that's all because kind of our technology. Next slide, please. So how does it actually work? Well, it's pretty simple. There's one single number to call, or we work with digital integrations. So we integrate, we have an API, and we integrate with GPS devices. We integrate with other apps. It all gets routed to our secure cloud, which then goes to our dispatch center. Our dispatch is manned by, you know, medical professionals who, with a touch of a button, can dispatch the nearest available ambulance. And what we have found is that while 95% of the African continent lacks kind of a 911 system, there's no lack of ambulances. They're just all independently operated, whether it be by private providers, public providers, mission, providers, NGOs, etc. And so in Kenya, we have over 1,000 providers on our system. And so with the touch of a button, our dispatch can identify where is the nearest available ambulance to that crash victim and get an ambulance moving to them very, very quickly. All of our ambulances are tracked in real time. And so they immediately, as we get the call, they're immediately dispatched via the system. And so they get the precise location. I know that there's been a lot of conversation about location, based software and kind of improvements needed in emerging markets. I mean, we leverage, all the location-based, software, whether that be Google Maps, our own maps, to be able to precisely identify where that patient is and get that ambulance to the right place. Next slide. So a couple of ways that we've started to use AI to kind of advance. I mean, in one way, we've revolutionized kind of post-crash care and emergency response already in Kenya, but the way that we've started to use it is to say, we now have thousands and thousands of data points around where crashes occur, what time of the day they occur. We know at the end of the month, crashes are highest. We know on Sunday mornings, they're highest. We know that, the curfew that we've had in place in Kenya for the last 18 months, right around, the curfew hours at 10 p.m., crashes peak. So we have all of that data from all of our response. And these are usually critical, car accidents. They're not just the fender bender. This is where someone has been injured and requires immediate transfer to a hospital. And so what we're doing is that we're actually using all of our crash data to better allocate and redistribute ambulances, so that rather than have all the ambulances in one location, is that they can dynamically be repositioned. So nothing that crazy, but it just shows you the power of having all of that crash data and how we can then continue to improve our response times. The second is that, which I've heard about today, all of these amazing technologies, would love to kind of talk to people about it, but in Kenya, a lot of the vehicles, or most of the vehicles, don't have any type of auto crash detection. And for serious accidents, someone may not be able to call us. They might be unconscious. They're not going to be able to dial that one number. They're not going to be able to press snap and request for help. But most of the cars do not have, or have not been enabled with the actual kind of e-call, technology like in Europe or other technology. And so we use plug and play. So we put in GPS devices and are able to, through that and leveraging telematic providers, be able to auto detect crashes so that our emergency dispatch center can quickly get an ambulance to you. So those are just two examples. There's a lot more. I think that because we are a cloud-based system and digital infrastructure, the data that we have is pretty unreal as it relates to crashes and how we can then actually be better and better at optimizing our response. Next slide. So I say, join us in making sure that no matter where you are and who you are, you have access to emergency help, and it's just minutes away. We all know the impact. I mean, you're 10 times more likely to survive if you have an ambulance, if you receive care in the first hour post an accident. Yet the reality is that most of the countries we're thinking about, caring about, and want to change, the conversation around mortality don't have a functioning 911. So it will take all of us to kind of push this agenda forward. Next slide. So get in touch if you want to bring FLAIR to your city or country. If you're sitting in a country or city where emergency services does not exist. If you are in Kenya, make sure that you have access to emergency services. Also car manufacturers, if you are thinking about kind of how to start deploying smarter vehicle technology in places like Kenya, definitely get in touch. And in general, just get in touch if you want to talk about post-crash care, because I realize that it oftentimes is not featured heavily enough in this conversation. Thank you, Bryn, so much.
Perfect, Kelly. No, it's fantastic. And I think, doing some research around that, Kelly, and I looked at a WHO report called Saving Lives, which was from 2017. So sort of 4 years ago already, 5 next year. And the indication was that if fatality rates were the same in low and middle income countries as they are in high income countries, then you could save around 500,000 lives per year. Now, that is all about post-crash response, effectively. And the first part to that is knowing that the collision has occurred and then connecting them with the emergency response service. So unless we achieve that, I really personally struggle to see how we achieve the 2030 agenda, because it doesn't matter how good those roads are, how the vehicles are. If we can't get the post-crash response, then we're not going to achieve those targets. And I think it is an underserved area, and it's fantastic to see your work pushing that forward. So thank you very much for your contribution. That's great. And I think now we move on to our last speaker before Priti will do the close. So is Ite there from MDGo? A really fascinating look, again, focusing more on the post-crash side, but some really interesting uses of AI in order to advance the post-crash care. So,
hey, how are you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Over to you.
Super, great. So I think we have a video that we should share. Yeah, and then we have like 3 minutes to talk. So maybe we'll just hit the play.
MDGo collects in real time anonymous acceleration data from the vehicle and uses it to provide a detailed analysis on passengers' injury and vehicle damages in 10 seconds from the moment of the accident. Do you wonder how we do it? MDGo collects in real time anonymous acceleration data from the proprietary MDGo Sense device or in-vehicle sensors or other aftermarket devices through continuous connectivity. With this data, MDGo calculates the forces that were applied to the vehicle. Based on that, MDGo uses AI models and biomechanical expertise to instantly calculate the forces that were applied to the passengers and to translate this to a detailed injury report in medical language. This information enables a faster and more accurate medical treatment. In parallel, MDGo analyzes the vehicle intrusion to provide insurers with both a detailed description of the damaged area and key mechanical insights such as vehicle immobility and the severity of the damages. All the data gathered in the process are then combined into a report that's sent to insurers and first responders, describing all aspects of the car accident to power a faster and better claims process while saving lives.
All right, great. So I think I have 3 minutes or so, and during that time, I think that we'll talk mainly about 3 points. So first of all, if it wasn't very clear, we use stickers that looks just like this one. It's a little bit smaller than an Easy Pass, and it's mounted the same on the windshield vehicle. We use no apps. There's no process, no wires, no buttons. It takes about 1 or 2 seconds to mount it, and from that moment and on, that vehicle is connected to our cloud forever and ever. And the most important part when we're looking at distributing life-saving technologies, just like the one you saw, if it wasn't clear, then that thing is being activated only upon accident, then we use AI to actually be able to translate the forces that were applied to the environment to the actual forces that were applied to different body regions of different occupants, and also to understand exactly what has happened to the vehicle. And then we actually build our report claiming an accuracy of about 94%. What is the exact injury that has occurred per body region, per passenger? So that's what is being done with the technology, and that data is being pushed automatically to the first responders if needed, and if no, that's going to the insurance. Why? I will talk about that in a second. So the first thing is the consumer adoption. I believe that when we build technologies that we would like to be distributed as widely as possible, we need to think of the end consumer and why would they play along? Why would they? I specifically don't believe in downloading apps. I don't think that people usually do so. And if they do, they delete it usually after 7 days if they haven't used that. But if you're looking at apps, why should people download that? Why it should be sustaining their phone, et cetera, et cetera. So when we produce those kind of products, how can we make sure that that product will remain where we would like it to be? So consumer adoption is something which is extremely important. Keep or maintain people's privacy is something that it's extremely important for us. This is why we don't monitor data. This is why we don't use smartphones or apps, etc. So the second thing is distribution and simplicity. When we are looking to distribute technologies, the simplicity is something which is extremely important, because even if we can build something that we think it's fairly simple, you just have to lift up the hood, connect something to the vehicle's battery, just add a couple of more things, you have perhaps 1 or 2 or 5% of the population that would do so. Why? Because people in general don't think they will ever be involved in an accident. They don't think about those things, and doing all those process or all those tasks is something that the vast majority of people won't ever do. So if you're looking at the distribution and simplicity, for us, we believe that it must be as simplified as possible. We were really trying to do that. We couldn't have thought, or at the moment we cannot think about something which is easier than mounting the sticker for 1 second. That's something that we put a lot of thought into. And the last thing I would like to talk about is the many amazing technologies have been shown here, and that is obviously extremely important. I think that one of the most fortunate things when we're looking at car accidents and safety, etc., is the financial model behind that, because you can build every possible technology that you might think of and save few more lives, but eventually the question is, who's going to pay for that? In our case, on my background, I'm a medical doctor. All I care about is how can we take the same thing that we do at the trauma unit into the vehicle itself without going through different imaging process and different physician that takes us sometime between 20 to 40 minutes. I was looking to have all the data that I need within the first few seconds. But unfortunately, the current economic system doesn't support pushing billions of dollars into such technologies. And then the biggest challenge is, how do you, on one hand, build a technology that would save life and will serve the purpose that you were looking at, but from the other hand, will have a positive unit economic, will have a sustainable business model. In our case, we've asked ourselves, who is the other beneficiary from data from an accident other than the 911 and the person that is in trouble? And obviously, you can guess that the answer is the insurance company. So we provide that as part of an insurance policy coverage. And I believe that the only way to move forward, I wouldn't say the only way, but one of the most sustainable ways, at least, especially in countries that are not very rich, is practically by harnessing the data and the product that you would like to bring to the world, or we would like to bring to the world in that case, and harnessing that into a different paradigm that would having the data will justify to pay that thing. So in our case, who pays for that? It's insurance companies. So 911 and everyone gets that for free. So practically you get a life-saving device that the end consumer pays nothing for, the 911 pays nothing for, so there's no infrastructure, everything is cloud-based, et cetera, et cetera. And the only one that pays here is those who can actually do so. And usually the insurance companies, they have quite a lot of money. So consumer adoption and distribution and simplicity. And I believe that one of the most important things that usually are not being talked too much is a sustainable business model, is what I believe is one of the most important key factors to distribute such technologies. I didn't say so, but thank you so much for having the opportunity, and I'm very glad to be here. And that's it on my end.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your insights. And when you think about where are you deploying the technologies at the moment, Itai? You're based in Israel, so I assume you're doing the work there. But when you start to look then at sort of low, middle income countries, how do you see the sort of technology being adopted in those countries? Is it?
So I can tell you that we haven't deployed that in low to medium income countries. We're deployed in the European Union and the US. We were trying to build something that would be, as I've mentioned before, very economical, efficient. So it won't cost more than 10 or 12 bucks for several years per car. But we don't have any, at least currently. and experience with low-income countries.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's something that we can work on together. So I'm looking forward to the collaboration.
My pleasure.
So, I really appreciate your time. So I think that brings us to a close. I'd just like to invite Priti Gautam, who works with the Special Envoy on Road Safety, Jean Todt. Priti, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah, if you'd like to give some closing remarks. I mean, it's been a fantastic session. I apologize for running over, but I think the insights that we've had have been really interesting. So over to you.
Exactly. Thank you, Brit, and good afternoon, everyone. I will keep my closing remarks crisp. First of all, we should thank you and congratulate you, Bryn, for engaging us through this compelling discussion today. On behalf of all of the organizers of AI for Road Safety Initiative, this includes our office, the Office of the Special Envoy for Road Safety, ITU, the Office of the Envoy on Technology. I thank all of the speakers, partners from public, private, academia, UN, and civil society for taking us on a journey across the safe system to many regions around the world through the lens of artificial intelligence. We have seen how previous limitations in road safety performance have already been breached by the application of digital technology and AI. And we've also seen that there's so much more that we can capitalize on. And that's exactly the reason why we decided to launch the AI for Road Safety Initiative. So just a few brief reflections from me in terms of how our discussion today will shape the initiative. The opportunity to improve road safety data was an overwhelming theme through our discussions today across all pillars, and it showcased a multitude of tools that are already available to manage and enhance the data that exists. Cloud data management, opportunity to cloud source data, GIS, location risk mapping can already help close some gaps in road safety data, and we should explore how to maximize that. And of course, there's still so many gaps that we could fill with AI. So data will definitely be a focus for the AI for Road Safety Initiative. It is also no surprise that AI and safer vehicles was another popular theme, as we also saw in the poll. We agree that there is a huge divide in the safety features and technologies between the developed and less developed. While we're excited about the upcoming technology, we agree that we still need to harness and deploy the technologies that already exist to those who need it most. We also heard about how the uptake of AI and technology is pushing us to develop and upgrade regulatory frameworks. We also saw the opportunity to harness AI to improve post-crash through coordinated response, through trauma care and insurance schemes. And not to forget to mention the opportunity to make our roads more inclusive by focusing on vulnerable groups such as children, and the importance of building technologies that consider the youth perspective. And all of these considerations will be built into the AI for Road Safety Initiative. So what's coming next? As requested by the Special Envoy for Road Safety in his remarks earlier today, we will focus on concrete actions and outcomes, which could include challenges, readiness landscapes, webinars and training series, linking with regional observatories, and launching AI for road safety projects with private, public sector, civil society, and partners. So we invite you to contact us if you're interested in partnering on projects under the AI for Road Safety umbrella. We are very open to collaboration. We are also expanding partnership across the UN system to explore the intersections of AI and road safety and the respective mandates. So looking at AI for road safety for children, for example, for cities, the environment, for mobility, for health. And we're also linked with the UN Interagency Working Group on AI. Our priorities are to expand partnerships across regions to raise the visibility around the world of AI as one of the solutions to achieving our 50 by 30 targets. And we're also planning for another virtual event and to launch a challenge in the coming months. The opportunities we consider under this umbrella of the AI for road safety to be endless. We look forward to working with you all. Stay tuned and stay in touch. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Priti. So I think with that, we'll bring the session to a close. I think I'd like to thank all of the ITU Secretariat that are hiding in the background, without which we wouldn't have been able to put on this event and have it run so smoothly. So thank you very much to all our colleagues at the ITU. And then we look forward to informing you about the next events that we'll be holding in the short future. So thank you very much for your participation today. It's been a great session.